I think we are going to begin the webinar. So they are all welcome to this third webinar. This is the third ESSEC Vegan Finance webinar. We are going to focus once more on veganism, which is more and more important. David, with our first guest speaker, will come back to explanations relating to veganism, but just to give a small refresher, veganism relates to the fact that we must avoid using animals in food, clothing, etc. In addition to, of course, focusing on animal welfare, veganism contributes to solving the issue of climate change, as you know, and becoming vegan is a way to contribute to a better world, a better climate condition, and what we call a sustainable life. So I'm not going to say more about veganism. Today we have 6 wonderful guest speakers. So the first one is David Pannell from Vegan Business Tribe. David, it's your third time with us, so I thank you very much for being with us again. So I'm just, well, maybe we can begin a wee bit in advance if you agree. So David.
Fantastic. Do you want me to make a start and share my screen maybe?
Yes, okay, that's fine.
Fantastic. Give me 1 second just to get the technology working. Here we go. So hopefully you should be able to see my shared screen now. Just give me a little bit of thumbs up.
Yes, that's good. Very good, David.
Fantastic. Then we're all good to go. So let's get started then. And thank you so much for inviting me back for the third time. It always feels really special to do one of these more academic events. And my name is David Pannell, and I'm the founder of Vegan Business Tribe, which you can see on the screen. And that is a support community of hundreds of vegan businesses around the world. Myself, I've also worked as a consultant to some of the biggest food brands and restaurant chains in the world to help them better understand plant-based consumers and develop better vegan and plant-based products. And alongside that, I'm also the official UK agent for the Vegan Society, their vegan trademark scheme. And I've helped hundreds of companies get their product registered with the Vegan Society. As well as, I mustn't forget, I'm also the host of the Vegan Business Tribe podcast that you can find on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your pods, just to give that a little bit of a plug. Now, I'm not going to use slides all the way through, but I think it's just worthwhile starting with a couple. So on my screen, you can see that this is me. And today I'm going to bring you bang up to date with the latest statistics and trends from the vegan and the plant-based sector. But before we dive into that, I just think it'd be useful to start by defining what veganism actually is, because if somebody identifies as being vegan, then that person, as far as practically possible, will exclude any product from their life that is derived from animals or that causes suffering to animals in its production. And they might do this for ethical reasons, wanting to end the suffering of animals. They might want to do it to reduce the impact of the environmental impact of animal agriculture, or they might do it for health reasons, or maybe a combination of all three. And the obvious part of this is food. So vegans don't eat meat made from animals, don't drink milk or eat cheese and dairy made from animal milk, don't eat any animal products such as eggs, and don't consume products that have got animal derivatives in them. And you might think that that's fairly straightforward, but in animal agriculture, there are lots of what is considered to be waste products. So in meat production, there's a lot of leftover bones, muscles, skin and hair. And because otherwise they would be just thrown away, these are really cheap for manufacturers to use in other products. So these waste products, you know, the bits of animals that people don't actually eat, they're reused and they find their way into absolutely everything. So bones are ground up to whiten and discolor sugar, as we see on the top left. Muscles and sinew, they're melted down to make gelatine, which you'll all be very familiar with, as you see the top right, because that's what Jelly Babies and many children's sweets is made from. Lanolin from sheep's wool, if we go to the bottom left, that's put into cornflakes and breakfast cereals to fortify the vitamin D content. And even fruit, yes, some fruit isn't vegan, because apples and oranges, they can be coated in beeswax and shellac that comes from insects to give them that fresh shine. And sometimes as a vegan, you think that if there is a way for a manufacturer to sneak a bit of animal into a product, then there's a good chance that they're going to do it. But it's not just food. If somebody is following a vegan lifestyle, then that also extends to the clothes they wear too. So vegans will exclude animal-derived leather, wool, silk, and products like that. And the same applies to cosmetics too. So excluding wherever possible products that have been tested on animals as well. So that's what veganism is. It's not a new thing. The Vegan Society was actually founded back in 1944. So it's been with us for a long, long time. But the vegan food market, which is mainly what I'm going to be talking about today, it has seen massive double-digit growth over the past 4 years. And these statistics that you see here on your screen, they're from the American US plant-based sector. And we're now starting to see more realistic continuing growth as this market matures. And the reason that the sector has seen such growth is because it isn't just vegans who are buying these products. People who identify as vegan in the Western world only make up between 1 to 5% of the general population. But 70% of the population now say that they regularly buy vegan or plant-based alternative products. And research has suggested that up to 80% of vegan products, so such as oat milk or plant-based burgers, they're bought and consumed by non-vegans, up to 80%. In fact, Beyond Meat's own statistics show that 93% of the customers buying their meat replacement Beyond Burger were meat eaters. And in these figures on the screen here, these again are from the US market. We see that there is no specific demographic buying plant-based anymore. It has achieved massive market penetration. So young people, old people, high incomes, low incomes, vegans, non-vegans, they're all now making plant-based a regular part of their shopping experience. But don't think that this is a new marketplace. Some people have been quick to write off plant-based as a passing trend or the latest fad, but we've actually had plant-based alternatives on the market for a very long time. For example, Protos. This was a vegetable meat product. It was an animal replacement product, first released in the 1890s by one John Harvey Kellogg, whose name you might be familiar with because his family business went on to do rather well. And we think that meat replacement products are something new. But this first one here, it was commercially released on the market over 130 years ago. And the Golden Age Cookbook, published in 1898, it included recipes for meat alternatives like mock chicken, and other cookbooks at the same time, such as Mrs. Rora's Vegetable Cookery and Meat Substitutes book. That gave recipes such as mock veal roast, made from lentils, breadcrumbs, and peanuts. So throughout the last 100 years, many plant-based alternatives, they've enjoyed mainstream status, such as this 1948 advert for chocolates, which is advertised as a tender, juicy slice of protein-rich meat-like nourishment. So when the media says that meat alternatives and plant-based products are just a passing fad, they simply don't know their history. But we are now starting to see a little bit of a shakeout in the marketplace, in the sense, especially in the plant-based meats category, because that's become very crowded. And if we look at the UK, then we've seen that a number of premium vegan brands have been struggling. So brands such as Meatless Farm that announced redundancies and that it was entering administration just this month in the UK. And the media, they've jumped on these plant-based businesses struggling as proving that the vegan fad is over. And in this photo, the woman in the middle there, that's Kelly Vowles, and she's one of our members at Vegan Business Tribe. And I am extremely proud of Kelly because she went on to national television in the UK last week to defend the vegan sector after that news station announced the death of veganism, following a number of high-profile vegan companies closing down. Unfortunately, she was armed with all the statistics, and she was able to tell them that the reason that some plant-based brands are struggling at the moment, it's not because of lack of customer demand, as the station was suggesting. In fact, the opposite is true. So what's really going on in the sector at the moment? Well, when people were first discovering plant-based products, consumers were willing to pay a premium for them. They were new, they were exciting, they were exclusive. But now that so many of us are regularly buying vegan and plant-based as part of our everyday shop, remember, it's 70% of people now buy vegan and plant-based, we're no longer willing to pay that premium price for products that we buy daily. And supermarkets, they've responded to this, and they've introduced their own brand versions to meet that cheaper demand. So, especially in a time of economic downturn, few people are going to spend £2 on a litre of premium branded oat milk when you can buy the supermarket's own brand for a fraction of that price if you just look at the shelf below. In fact, on this slide here, we can see two own label plant milks from the same supermarket. So one is pitched as a standard own brand in the middle of the screen there, and then also a budget own brand on the right at a quarter of the price of the branded plant milk. Now, that's hard to compete with as an independent brand. And we're seeing this most strikingly in the plant-based meat category. So supermarkets, they've invested heavily in meat-free, and they might now have both their own plant-based range and that separate budget plant-based range alongside the branded products. So this example here is from Tesco's, one of the biggest supermarket chains in the UK. And you might expect to pay as much as £4.50 for two branded Beyond Burgers. Or you can buy Tesco's own range Wicked Kitchen burgers in the middle there for about a third cheaper. Or if you're feeding a family or you're in a very tight budget, they've also got their budget Plant Chef range at a stunning 80% cheaper per burger. And that is almost impossible for these premium branded companies to compete with, especially when we've got a cost of living squeeze. And the data backs this up as well. So Cantor research shows that in the UK, sales of premium plant-based meat, the meat brands, that's declined by 10% over the past year. But sales of supermarket own brand meat-free products, that's grown by nearly 14%. Meaning that we've still seen that 4% increase in volume growth in meat-free this year. And we know that the demand for plant-based and vegan is still extremely strong across the globe. So in Europe, plant-based meat sales, they grew by 21% between 2020 and 2022, and that's huge. While animal meat sales, they decreased by 8% in that same period. And inflation has also been a lot kinder to the plant-based sector. And we've only seen a 1% rise in vegan and plant-based meat prices, whilst animal meat prices, they've risen by 11%. Now, looking beyond the vegan meat category, vegan milk alternatives, they're now the most developed plant-based category in Europe, making up 11% of the total milk market. And yes, that includes all the dairy milk as well. And unit sales for plant-based milk, they've increased by 20%, while sales of cow milk, that's down 9%. And research in the US that found similar results happening there too, showing that the number of Americans who consume plant-based alternatives alternatives have now risen to 70% of the population. So we know that the consumption of animal-based products, it continues to fall and plant-based continues to rise. And the change in habits in such a short time, that is fairly remarkable. So in Germany, for example, meat consumption, it has dropped to a record low. Data published by the Germany's Federal Information Center for Agriculture, it revealed that in 2022, per capita, meat consumption fell by around 4.2 kilograms over 12 months. And in part, this change is being driven by governments themselves, realizing that if they're going to hit their commitments on CO2 reduction and environmental responsibility, then they need to change how they feed their citizens. For example, last year, the German government announced the statement that you see on screen here, that one thing is clear: we have to eat much less meat because it is simply very difficult to produce meat without massive CO2 waste. And other European governments have followed suit. So the French government has just put 12 million euros into creating vegan cheese as part of France's 2030 sustainability plan. In the UK, the government has announced an investment of £12 million into developing the cellular agriculture manufacturing hub. And that's hoping to make the UK a world leader in producing cultivated meat. And a number of local councils in the UK, such as Oxford City Council, they've also banned meat from all their council catering contracts and events to help them meet their goals on sustainability. Even some people will love this picture, some people hate it, but even the sacred coronation oil that was used to anoint King Charles at his coronation recently, that was made without any animal ingredients for the first time in history, reflecting, as the palace said, modern animal-friendly sensitivities. Okay, so I'm just going to jump off slides for a second. Oh, wonderful to see you all back here again. So we know that change driven by government policy, it can be extremely slow. And usually companies only make changes when changes in legislation force them to do it. However, in the plant-based sector, we've actually seen companies and commercial organizations, they're the ones leading the way at the moment, and they're being driven by their own commitments to environmental sustainability. For example, during Berlin's Green Week in January, budget supermarket chain Lidl, which operates something like 12,000 stores in more than 30 countries across the world, they announced that they were actively deprioritizing animal products to fight the climate crisis. And they've since grown their own in-house Vermondo line of meat and dairy alternatives up to 50 items. And they've stated that they want to drastically replace the animal products on their shelves with plant-based ones by 2025. And furniture giant IKEA, they revealed in their most recent sustainability report that they plan to become a climate positive company by 2030. And that's seen them introduce plant-based meatballs and dairy-free soft-serve ice cream into their in-store cafes and restaurants. And looking directly at the food retailers, Burger King, they have invested heavily into plant-based as a USP to differentiate them from the other fast food chains. And they've committed to 50% of their menu being plant-based by 2030. And it's these larger manufacturers and brands investing so heavily in plant-based that have really changed the balance of the sector. The challenger brands, such as Beyond Meat and Oatly, they took a huge lead in this marketplace. But now it's the traditional food production companies who are looking to win that market share back. For example, Cargill. Now, Cargill is a company that you might or might not have heard of, but Cargill, they're one of the largest food companies in the world, and they turn over something like $165 billion a year. And they've estimated that over the next 25 to 50 years, sorry, the next 25 to 30 years, we're going to see an increase in demand of 70% for protein consumption. And that demand's going to come just from an increasing world population. And Cargill, they want to be the food company providing that protein from what they say will be a diverse range of sources. And by that, they mean that they intend to continue producing animal meat, but also to dominate the plant-based marketplace alongside that. And a company like Cargill, they already have all the resources. They've already got the global distribution infrastructure. And more importantly, they've got the money to play that long game and win pricing wars that the newer plant-based brands simply don't have. And we've already seen the same in other areas of a plant-based sector. So Alpro, one of the leading producers of dairy alternatives in Europe, that's been acquired by France's largest dairy producer, Danone. And we should not think that these global animal-based food suppliers are just going to quietly go out of business as consumer behavior changes towards vegan and plant-based. They're going to do everything they can to own this sector themselves, whilst at the same time protecting their traditional animal-based products for as long as they can. But it's not just for manufacturers. Retailers have also been quick to adapt to these changes in consumer buying behavior. And I'm just going to jump back onto the slides again, if that's okay for 1 minute. Just share my screen. Fantastic. So in the Netherlands, animal meat sales, they've declined for 9 consecutive quarters. And as a result, Lidl have moved their meat alternatives, so they're now alongside the meat products in the refrigerators in that region. And in Spain, products from the vegetarian butcher, they're now being sold from the butcher counters at Carrefour supermarkets alongside animal meats. And in the US, Kroger conducted the same experiments by putting plant-based products into the meat aisle. And doing this, it raised sales of these plant-based products by 23 to 33%. And this trend of plant-based and vegan just becoming part of mainstream categories instead of its own subcategory, it is continuing. So for the first time this year, the National Restaurant Association show in Chicago, it no longer separated out plant-based as a separate category, because the majority of the companies displaying at the show, they all now offered vegan as standard. And in the UK, ready-to-go food retailer Pret, it is closing 75% of its vegetarian-only stores because 50% of its menu at their regular Pret stores is now vegan or vegetarian. In fact, they say that meat-free and vegan, that now accounts for 1 in 3 of their main meal sales. And a lot of the time when we talk about the vegan sector, we do concentrate on Europe and the US markets, but China is also becoming a huge emerging marketplace for plant-based. China now has their own vegan certification program, and the concept of eating vegan, it's been easily assimilated by the Chinese population due to the country's long-standing history of plant-based eating. In fact, it's thought that around maybe 5% of the country identifies as vegan, meaning that the Chinese plant-based protein industry, it's currently worth something like $1.4 billion. And Chinese consumers, they're also looking for new innovative products, such as plant leather that younger consumers call next-gen leather. And they see it as being superior products to the animal-based leathers that their parents might currently wear. So, we're seeing veganism continuing to grow and expand around the world, not just from people turning vegan, but through the huge penetration that vegan and plant-based has into the general population. And this is also bringing product maturity as well. So in the early days of the vegan product boom, if we go back 3 to 5 years, a lot of companies, they rushed out vegan products onto the shelves. And unfortunately, not all of them were great products. But this year, we've seen a real uptick in the quality and the maturity of those vegan products. So for example, companies such as Levy, again, another great French brand, they're producing vegan bacon that gives consumers a very close approximation of animal bacon. And in fact, Burger King has just permanently introduced Levy to its menu this January. And lots of other brands, they're following suit. They're actually adding in plant-based fats to their meat, and it makes them less healthy, for sure. But in return, they then cook, fry, and produce in a similar way. And it has that similar kind of burnt, greasy taste as animal meat does as well. And the plant-based seafood market, that is another market that is really starting to build momentum. And it's seen over 300% growth in the last 2 years. So companies like Revo Foods from Austria, and that's shown here on the left, they're using 3D printing technology to create vegan salmon fillets that are so realistic, consumers are convinced that they're eating real fish. And we're also now starting to see the industry's big producers, such as John West, there on the right, starting to bring their own vegan seafood alternatives to the marketplace too. However, despite this large percentage growth in sales, the vegan seafood market, it is still small, and it remains one of the least underdeveloped areas of plant-based foods, with only 43 million euros in sales being recorded in 2022. 43 million. For comparison, plant-based milk turned over 2.2 billion last year alone. So expect to see plenty of room for growth in this marketplace over the coming couple of years. And this year, we've also seen cultivated meat officially approved by the United States Department of Agriculture, allowing lab-grown meat to be sold for consumption in the States for the first time. And the European Food Safety Authority, they've recently held an event to review the latest data on cultivated meat and precision fermented dairy to hopefully pave the way to allow the same here in Europe. And cultivated meat, if you haven't been keeping up on what's been happening in the sector. So cultivated meat, such as developed here by Mark Post, who's the co-founder of Mossa Meat, and precision fermented dairy as well. These are two technologies that might revolutionize a plant-based marketplace by simply making it obsolete. Meat grown in a commercial laboratory, it is indistinguishable at every level from meat grown by animals. Milk produced through precision fermentation in a manufacturing facility, it is indistinguishable from milk produced by cows. They can be used in the same way and consumers cannot tell the difference. So we're getting companies like France's Standing Ovation. They're producing vegan cheese that is identical to dairy cheese, but without the use of any animals in the process. And the same technology, it can be used to produce any dairy product that you could think of. And we've seen many different companies around the world invest heavily in this new fermentation technology. Now, these processors, they will come up a whole range of barriers, and probably the technology itself is the least of those barriers. We will have to overcome public opinion on consuming new products grown in manufacturing facilities. In Europe, we have what's called novel food rules, which means getting these products to market, it's going to take a lot of time and legal effort. And there's already been moves in Italy to ban what they call synthetic foods to protect food heritage. But it's coming, and it has the potential to replace animal agriculture entirely. And in the same way, they've also got the potential to replace the plant-based sector entirely too. I mean, why put all that effort to get the majority of the public to stop eating meat if that same meat can be produced without any of those environmental impacts and ethical concerns? And these technologies, they're not just reserved to meat and dairy. So this is Project X, and it's a Singapore-based vegan leather startup. And it's actually growing cultivated skin in the same way that we grow cultivated meat to produce a luxury vegan leather. And they've just been covered in Vogue magazine. They've just announced a $1 million pre-seed fundraising round. And we're seeing the same with other animal products, such as honey as well. So Melody plant-based honey, they use microbial fermentation to replicate that complex taste of bee-produced honey. And it's been adopted at Michelin-starred restaurants as a cruelty-free alternative. Okay, so just to finish off, I also want to mention another part of the vegan and plant-based market that is currently set to explode. And this is my 3-month-old daughter, Arwen. And because she's got 2 vegan parents, she's going to be raised vegan from birth. You can see we're getting her started early here with her reading. And vegan children, They are a growing phenomenon that will soon be too big to be ignored by the marketplace. And we know from research and surveys that children, they're twice as likely to be vegan than their parents. And we're now seeing parts of the world where low and no meat diets, they're the default diet for many children. So in Berlin, in Germany, for example, a recent report showed that almost half of all children in the city eat no or virtually no animal meat at all. And when you look at the figures countrywide, it shows that 33% of German children aged 4 to 14, they consume no or almost no meat. But despite the obviously huge demand, it is still a hugely underserviced market, with brands being really slow to develop vegan products aimed at children. And most vegan children's brands at the moment, they are currently small, independent current companies in the same way that the first vegan meat companies and plant milk companies were. But as we know from the children's sector in general, the opportunities are not just about food. Children are looking for entertainment, merchandise, experiences, education, and the leverage that these young people will have, Generation Alpha. So the leverage that they will have on their parents' spend as they grow up, that is going to be hugely significant. And as the vegan children's population grows, it will only be a short time until the demand for vegan confectionery, vegan children's cereals and food aimed at plant-based children, before that becomes too large to ignore for the larger established manufacturers. Okay, so I think I'm almost bang on half an hour there. So that's how long I was given. So I think we're up to time. So if you want to learn more, then over on Vegan Business Tribe, we have our Vegan Business Academy, and that's got hundreds of hours of guides, articles, video masterclasses, and online courses to help you succeed in the vegan sector. And over there, you'll find both free content and member-only content that you get access to by signing up as part of Vegan Business Tribe through the website. And also, if you're not yet tired of hearing my voice, we've also got the Vegan Business Tribe podcast, and you can find that on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or wherever you get your pods. So please do go pick that up too. So thank you so much. That's me over. I don't know if we're doing questions or not. We might have a couple of minutes, but I will hand back to the ESSEC team.
Thank you very much, David. It was a very appetizing presentation, and well, I was very happy to see your daughter on the screen. So I think we learned a lot of things relating to the veganism in the 19th century. I didn't know myself about Kellogg's, etc. And even China Vegan Society, it's quite new, surprising. So I wanted to know if some participants had questions. Yes. Somebody has a question? Basically, you can just, we have not said that at the beginning of the webinar, but you can just raise your hand or just say, I have a question. It's the easier way. Anyone a question? No, I don't see for the moment. I have a question for you, David. Because relating to the plants, I'm consuming oat milk, and there is I have realized there is always questions relating to soya for different reasons. I think that soya is without any, transformation, etc. I think that in veganism, as in other activities, we control the process in order to make sure everything is fine. So can you tell us more about maybe the difference between the plants that are used in the food industry?
Yeah, it's actually a really important comment, one which I almost put into the presentation as well. That if you go to any of the plant-based food shows at the moment, there are a lot of people trying to find alternatives to soya, because soya isn't the most sustainable product, perhaps. But 50%, in fact, it's more, I think. When we look at soya, 80% of soya is actually used to feed animal agriculture. So if we want to actually reduce our soya use, the way is to actually, stop feeding that soya to animals and then killing those animals and eating them for their protein, just to eat the plants direct. And we would very much, cut down on the use of things like soya as well. But there are lots of companies now looking into alternative protein sources. So you've got companies such as Doug, who are looking into, they're producing milk made from potatoes, which doesn't sound appetizing at all, but it's actually a very nice plant milk product. You've got companies like Good Hope over in the States. They're making plant milk out of sesame seeds, I think it is as well. And they're actually using the waste from other processors, from other sesame processors like tahini, to actually make their milk out of as well. So yeah, there's lots of people looking at these alternative plant protein sources now. And as people become more familiar with them, it won't just be oat. We will see more like potato, more like pea protein. These are the sort of vegetables and plants that can be grown anywhere in the world. So there's a huge savings to make there, that you can be growing those in Europe. You can be growing them on the doorstep of where those consumers actually are.
Okay, thank you. Ariane has a question for you.
Yes, please. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask you if you have data about vegan consumption in France, which is reputed for, which is very famous for its gastronomy, but it said that is a little, is not, that the vegan consumption is less than in other countries.
Yes, so at the moment we're kind of waiting on new reports to come through. So the problem we have with the actual looking at veganism consumption is, in these kind of big studies, they only happen every 10 years or so, where they really look into the consumption of populations. And previously they've lumped in veganism with vegetarianism, with other what they call hobby interests and things like that. So we're waiting for the new big food studies to come around, where they will look at veganism just on their own, away from vegetarianism. But Europe as a whole is kind of leading the way. So I don't have any specific statistics on France. Usually people are looking at Europe as a whole, or they tend to look at Germany, because Germany is one of the outliers in Europe as well. But globally, we are seeing that 70% getting repeated in most Western countries. The 70% of the population, they may not identify as vegan, but they're now regularly buying plant-based alternatives and putting them into their basket place. But no, it would be interesting to look specifically at France. But as I know, I haven't seen any direct any direct reports into that.
Another question? No, it's fine. So now we are going to welcome Elysabeth from Los Angeles, which means that I think it's maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, Elysabeth. So thank you for being with us. You're great. So I give you the floor. Yes, you're muted.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm no longer muted. Bonjour tout le monde. It is indeed in the middle of the night here. So if I say things that don't make sense, I apologize. It is because it is very late here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully all of you can see this now. And before I do this, I'll just say I loved our last presentation, and we got to hear so much about great things like food. Here we're going to dive into the financials more. So this is really a numbers presentation. I am speaking about veganism in the capital markets. So we have EatV, which is the world's only plant-based innovation ETF. This is the finance conference, so I'm sure you know, but just in case you don't, an ETF is an exchange traded fund. It is We are listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's traded very much like a stock, but it's one ticker, but an ETF. I liken it to a grocery basket. If you're in the store and you say, oh, well, I'm plant-based, so I'm going to have rice and beans and a Beyond Meat burger and some oat milk and some fruit and nuts and seeds and some tempeh and TVP. You get to the grocery store and you check out and you have your 40 products. You put them in one grocery bag and you walk home with your vegan grocery bag. Well, that's what this is. It is one fund or one grocery bag. And we have just about 35 to 40 companies from around the globe that are focused at any point in the supply chain on innovating to replace animals for sustainable consumption. So we are focused on food systems transformation as a whole, and we do that through our financial product. So I'll be talking about how you make a plant-based or vegan, referred to as vegan, financial product, how we did it, and really what your money can do when you align your money with your values. You see what kind of impact you can have in the world. Okay, first we go through very quickly the financials. Eat V, we are seeking growth. We believe that the world will switch its diet, and when it does, it won't be San Francisco and Brooklyn. It will be everyone: China, India, France, the United States, old people, young people, educated, of all religions, of all ages. Everyone will switch their food systems. That's an enormous transformation. That's an enormous chance for financial upside. And then, as we see, we will have impact as well. We'll talk about that. Like I had mentioned before, we have about 35 to 40, depending on the quarter, companies in our ETF or plant-based basket. And those are companies anywhere in the supply chain, innovating with plants or plant-derived ingredients to replace animals for sustainable consumption. Now, that could be plant-based foods, that could be fermented proteins, that could be cultivated meat. And why would it be fermented proteins or cultivated meat? Well, it's replacing animals, and they all require sugar as a major feed to grow that food, those cells or those fermented proteins. So we consider them plant-based innovation, and they are replacing animals for sustainable consumption. Now, when you do this, you can, if you see my cursor here, you can address climate change, biodiversity loss, deforestation, food insecurity, human health, and animal welfare. I had talked about how one constructs a financial product around plant-based innovation or veganism. Well, we take the entire world, so we look at around the globe, those companies up and down the supply chain, anywhere in the supply chain where they're innovating to replace animals. So that's going to begin all the way at the beginning, ag tech, which refers to things like vertical farms, greenhouses, sustainable fertilizers, working with seeds, et cetera, to make plants more prolific and efficient in their production. Synthetic biology, or the innovation and technology companies that are licensing their IP so that other companies can make cultivated meat or precision fermentation, biomass fermentation products. The ingredient companies, as we were just talking about, the majority of soy is really fed to animals, and we're going to have other novel proteins so we can stop monocropping soy for animals. Quinoa, fava bean, chickpea, barley, these are all other ingredients that can be used to make plant-based products. And then getting those plant-based products to taste great, you're going to want to have flavor and texture companies. Then at the end of the line, we have consumer packaged goods in food and materials. So now our ETF or our basket is a plant-based innovation basket. That means innovation around plants to replace animals. So that can be food as well as materials. And the way we see it, if you're making less beef, then you're making less leather, which is a great thing. If you've ever been to a tannery, you know what an environmental nightmare that is. So we like that it acts as kind of a financial hedge. So the materials sector doesn't always move in tandem with the food sector. That's a good thing. So that gives you added diversity. Okay, I won't really stay here very much. I'll just say that if you want this information, you can go to EATV, that's our ticker, EATVETF.com. You can take a look at the top 10 holdings and you can see that we are indeed from around the world. Just again, to show that we're up and down the supply chain, here's again a list of where our companies are in the supply chain. But also something to show that people often think, oh, well, if it's plant-based innovation, it must be very risky, very volatile, and a bunch of really nano cap kind of stocks. It's not true, actually. We basically break out a third. Large cap companies, just under 30%, mid cap companies, just over 40%, and small cap companies, just over 30%. So you see what this tells you is that there are players in the food and materials supply chain, like Givaudan, for example, out of Switzerland, long time, it's an older company, about 100 years old. They are considered a large cap company. They're working on flavors and textures. They're innovating and working with other companies that are making plant-based products. They also have a plant-based innovation center in the United States. They're also investing in cultivated meat in Switzerland with Bühler and Migros, hope I'm saying that right. So they're deeply down the plant-based path and they're dedicated. And so it's not just the small startups that are looking to change the world. Many legacy companies are also using their expertise to make a difference. A short kind of story about that. If you are familiar with beer, AB InBev, they make Budweiser, not my favorite beer, actually, but they are the largest fermenters in the world. So who's got the most fermentation expertise? They do, and they're using that fermentation expertise to help startup companies and also to create their own alternative proteins out of fermenting proteins. So they've got a whole section called BioBrew, and they are fermenting proteins. So they're taking that long-time expertise and putting it towards plant-based and alternative proteins. So that's very exciting. Very quickly here, I won't really spend much time here except to say a lot of people are talking negatively about plant-based in the press, and they're talking that its business isn't going well. I can tell you that's just not at all what we see. There's some major indices around the world. You've probably heard of the S&P 500. There's also something called the Russell 2000. I'm not sure everyone's knowledge here in the room, so if I'm saying basic stuff, I apologize. The Russell 2000 is an index where you're basically focusing on small and some might even say mid-cap companies. You see, we compare really well. So we don't have much in common with the S&P 500, but we have a lot in common with the small and mid-cap Russell 2000. And you see, we beat them on pretty much every quarter. So, and this is in bad financial times. So another kind of highlight to the fund is the market's all crazy about AI. They haven't quite yet thought about food systems transformation and plant-based innovation. So a lot of these stocks are undervalued by the market. They haven't priced in yet that the whole market's going to shift for food and that there's money to be made there. So we see that, I'll just point out this number, we see our EBITDA growth compared to the Russell 2000. We're basically on par on all the other metrics, but including revenue growth, but you see that EBITDA growth really much better for plant-based innovation products. So that's kind of nice to see that silver lining to a tricky economy, that there are great options to be had. Okay, but now let's get to what I think this group is probably most focused on. So all of that was to say how we constructed that financial product and how we put it together, how we were thinking about it, looking around the world, looking at the supply chain, and how we are comparing our metrics so that we could have a solid financial product that Wall Street would understand that Wall Street could get behind and believe in, and then Wall Street can put its capital into. What this does is this moves capital into plant-based innovation, further fostering growth, innovation, new products, new investments. So I firmly believe that we will not shift the global food supply system if we don't get Wall Street involved and if we don't move their capital to our businesses. Okay, so what do our businesses do for the planet in addition to animal welfare and our own health? I love this slide. This is basically the point of the entire presentation. So you see plant-based innovation has a global temperature warming potential of 1.18 degrees Celsius. You've probably heard of the Paris Accords suggesting a 1.5 degree or less change in temperature. Now we're barely struggling to hold on to a 2.0 degree change in temperature. We compare this to the most common investment that there is in the public markets, the S&P 500 index. You see that index has a temperature warming potential of 3.2 degrees Celsius, and that's how everyone is investing. So we are very happy to say that plant-based innovation can bring down the carbon footprint of one's portfolio. If you look over here, we've been certified carbon neutral without buying credits. What that means is if you're not involved in the industries that are heavily emitting carbon, methane, nitrous oxide, like the meat and dairy industries, if you're not doing that, then just by avoiding those emissions, you are already having a better climate footprint and carbon footprint. So this is kind of the power of your dollars when you put them to work, not just with your values, but when you put them to work to make change. This is the kind of change you're making. So we're happy about that. If you don't believe me, you can believe the Boston Consulting Group. They did a study looking at investing in green technology, alternative building materials, alternative energy, electric vehicles, or plant-based innovation. Which one of those green technologies was going to have the most impact at reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Indeed, plant-based meats, alternative proteins are 3 times to 40 times more impactful at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Primarily, you see here 3 times more impactful than alternative cement, 11 times more impactful than cars and vans. Primarily, the reason for this is the CapEx needed to shift the global food supply system is a lot less than what's needed to shift cars and energy or build new high rises that are 40 stories high. A lot of the technology is already there. Again, I talked about AB InBev. They've already got big biofermenters. Some of the infrastructure is already there. Also, think about it from the individual level. How many people can take off work, rip off their roof, pay for solar panels, live through construction? It's a big deal. But it's not so hard to be at a restaurant and say, oh, I'm going to have a plant-based burger instead of a regular burger. You can do that today. Like you can go to the grocery store and you can say, I'm not going to buy this hamburger. I'm going to buy the plant-based hamburger or the plant-based chicken or the plant-based sausage. There's so many options today. Or I'm just going to have a salad at lunch. These are very easy decisions to make. So the adoption curve for the consumer is a lot easier. Okay, according to the United Nations, our global food system, that's animal agriculture, is the primary driver of biodiversity loss. As we discussed in the last presentation, which was so great, you're cutting down trees to plant and grow soy and some other crops. That soy has protein and fiber. Are you giving that food to people? No, you're giving it to animals, and then they need more land, water, and time. You still don't have enough food, have to cut down more trees, grow more crops. Giving that crop and food to people? No, you're still giving it to animals. So an inefficient system that cannot feed the world as we have a growing population. but more so than that, a system that is destroying our planet and our biodiversity. According to Our World in Data, 41% of the world's tropical deforestation is caused from animal agriculture. According to Your Stake, which is a third-party identifier, EAT-V has no exposure to deforestation producers, and it's because we're not involved in the animal agriculture system that is basically destroying the planet. Okay, so many of us here, myself included, interested in animal welfare. So again, powered by data from Your Stake, we see that investing, and we use the number of $10,000 over 5 years, investing in EAT-V is 4.4 times more impactful at improving animal welfare than diet alone. And that's because you can only eat so much in a day. So you can only replace so much food in a day, but your dollars can go a long way at shifting things. So we are indeed concerned about animal welfare, deeply, in fact. So this is a great statistic. Something I'm not diving into is when you put your dollars into something like EAT-V, which again, may or may not be of interest to this crowd, but I'm just telling you how we shaped our financial product to draw the capital of Wall Street, what we were thinking from building the financial side, and the impact that we wanted to do with it. And we had that in mind when we built the financial product as well. So we're not telling anyone to not change their diet. Please change your diet, but you can see how far your dollars can go for animal welfare, but then of course in reducing human healthcare costs, in reducing pandemic risk. There's a lot of benefits, reducing biodiversity, in reducing food insecurity, reducing climate change. There's a lot of benefits to changing your diet and investing in plant-based innovation. I love this slide as well. This comes from Synthesis Capital's Catherine Tubb. She was one of the researchers in Rethink X's global paper about the demise of animal agriculture by 2030, which they've now revised, I think, to be 2035, 2040. What she did is she studied when she thought the world would adopt plant-based innovation and alternative proteins. So you see, we're just about here in 2023, and you see things starting to creep up. Oh gosh, let's call it 2026, 2027. That's when they predict that you'll see price parity in production. So the cost to make meat is going to be the same as the cost to make plant-based meat. And when you get that cost structure, whoops, where's my cursor? When you get that cost structure, I don't know, there we go. When you get that cost structure to be the same, people start adopting that which is better for their health, for the health of animals, for the health of the planet. And by the time you get to, there we go, by the time you get to about 2032, you have a 10% adoption rate. And that's when it just goes really quickly from there. So of course, no one can predict the future, but I think it's interesting to see, and particularly from an investment standpoint, you really can't time the market. So, you know, price parity could come in late 2024 and adoption could come by 2030, you know, et cetera. Also, I'll point out that there's a lot of money to be made in this area. It doesn't look like it's the big curve, but a lot of the early people, you see this with venture capital as well. If you get in early and you get in really low, then you've, you know, just got the better ride ahead of you. So I won't go into my team, but it takes a lot of people to put together an ETF. I'll tell you that much. Really, we do this to draw capital from Wall Street to plant-based innovation and help to really further the shifting global food supply system. In the words of Buckminster Fuller, to change something, build a new model to make the old model obsolete. I went over a lot of information. I'm super happy to take questions if you'd like.
Thank you very much, Elysabeth. It was so clear. So even you are 1 o'clock, more than 1 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. You are,
Yes.
it's really impressive. I think I saw a question in in the chat, and the question is asked by, the first question is by Laurent. Laurent, maybe you can ask directly to Elysabeth. It will be better, I think.
Sure. Hi, Elysabeth. Thank you for your presentation. I had a minor question because I saw in the companies in the fund Smurfit Kappa, and I'm not an expert, but for me it's a traditional packaging cardboard-based company, and I was wondering how does that fit in the investment theory, investment thesis of your fund? I mean, for me they are plant-based by default, but am I missing something there?
No, you're not. So we invest in food and materials. And for food, we kind of count this as a double count, if you will. It's plant-based materials, but really it's packaging for food. So we count them as a packaging company that helps make food more sustainable. That food has to be packaged, and we're trying to get rid of plastic and cut down on impact on the planet. And so you want to see as much just support of the food system to be sustainable as possible. So I think I'd mentioned we invest in plant-based materials as well as food. So that kind of goes in the materials bucket.
You want to ask another question, Laurent?
No, so I have a corollary question. I mean, how do they play in deforestation? Do they have anything specific? Because you mentioning vegan and carbon neutral. So do they have something specific as a cardboard company in regards to saving the trees?
Yes, right. It's a great question. We've been certified this by our third party, so we don't do it ourselves. It's by a third party supplier. We've been certified as not being involved in deforestation. So I can get back to you on if you're on LinkedIn, maybe let's do that. I can get back to you on if they're recycling or repurposing, or if they're using wood that's already been cut down for other purposes and they're using scraps from that. So I can get back to you on that for sure. And their sustainability footprint as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
David, do you want to add something? Because I saw you were you answered the question in the chat.
I was just going to add, so we were actually involved with helping Smurfit Kappa get their vegan certification through the Vegan Society. And one of the things you have to remember with packaging especially is a lot of it is made from recycled board, and quite often that recycled board has had print on it. And when you see that printed ink, more often than not will have animal products in it. Like, as I was saying in the opening, these are seen as waste products, and so they're really cheap for people to use. So these animal products find themselves into everything. But also the glues that are used in their fibers to make lots of board and make lots of packaging as well. Those glues are quite often animal derived as well. So what what SK did, they went through the vegan certification to remove all this from their process of their vegan line, and they're the only packaging company that have a vegan certified board line, so they can make vegan certified packaging to go with vegan food production, and they do have a carbon footprint. All large companies have a carbon footprint, but they have been very good at moving towards that direction of actually trying to reduce that and also bring out the vegan side of the product that they make too.
Yes, I'd love to add two things to that. All companies have a carbon footprint, most definitely, which is why EAT-V has a 1.18 degrees Celsius. It means we're moving the needle. It means we're still putting out carbon, but less than that Paris Accords number. But I love what David's saying here, and it's in the middle of the night for me, so maybe I'm not making the point, but if you're making less beef, you're making less leather. Animal products are in everything. I love that he mentions glue. I love that he mentions ink. I mean, who would think of that? It's truly everywhere. So you have this like two sides of the same coin. Once you start taking animals out of the food supply system, there's this benefit that we're going to have to start making alternative materials, innovate, drive capital from Wall Street to our sectors so that we can innovate to make alternative materials without animals. And they kind of go hand in hand. And thanks, David, for helping them get the certification. Sorry.
Do you have another question for Elysabeth? Or is it fine? I don't see anybody asking any question now. So Elysabeth, I think you can enjoy good sleep. Good sleep.
Yes, I will. I am going to go to bed. I want to thank everyone. Hopefully I didn't lose people with the deep dive on the numbers. I know that's never as exciting as other things, but you know, if you want to talk about anything, come find me on LinkedIn. I'm here to talk about all of it, how we started the product, how it's going.
There's
Happy
a
to.
question, I think, from Tae. Tae, yes, you have raised your hand.
No, I was just uploading.
That's great. That's great.
Thank you.
Okay,
So kind of you.
Elysabeth, maybe I shall contact you because ETF, I have other questions, but you need to get some rest. So have a good night and thank you for being with us for this conference. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bonne nuit à tous.
Bye. Bye-bye. So our next guest speaker is Jay. So Jay, we are very happy to welcome you. So now I let you talk about your topic relating to a better management of your wealth. So.
Thank you very much. And we're going to continue on the financial topic. So hopefully everyone can keep their energy up. That was a great presentation. So I'm going to build on that. I'm going to do the obligatory share of my screen. Hopefully you can all see that. Is that okay?
Yes, that's good. That's good, Jay.
Fantastic. That is not my dog, by the way, but yeah, a great image. So yeah, my name's Jay and my presentation today is all about how to make an impact with your money. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my background and I'm actually going to share with you 3 practical tips to help you get started, because I think a lot of the time when you look at these presentations, and there's loads of great speakers today, you can often come away from this type of thing feeling quite overwhelmed and quite unsure about where to start. And then as the weeks go on, you might feel like, well, actually, I haven't done anything. So hopefully there's 3 tips here that can help you get started. So this wouldn't be a financial presentation without a quick disclaimer, just to say that everything I discuss today is information only. It's not deemed as specific advice, but there's certain places you can go if you need specific advice for you. And a lot of the terms I explain the financial products and things with are based on UK terms, but hopefully there is an equivalent in France, in Europe as well. I do touch on a few bits around the world as well. On the bottom left-hand side, you'll see a little QR code, and that takes you through to all of the resources that I have personally, and I keep adding to them at the back end. So feel free to scan through. It's completely free to do that. And let's get started. So about me. I've got Alexa in the background. I'm not sure why she started up. But vegan is the first thing I want to mention. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. I thought out of everyone, it would be my little dog that disrupts the presentation, not my Alexa. So wonders of technology. So yeah, vegan first and foremost. I've been vegan for over 7 years now. This was the video that turned me vegan. 101 reasons to go vegan. I was away on holiday and first world problems. It was in the Caribbean. It was raining quite heavily for a couple of days. And I was browsing through YouTube and I saw this video. I was already vegetarian. I turned vegetarian for my health initially. I had certain health symptoms that literally went away overnight just by cutting out meat. And then when I started to realize all of the impact of the dairy industry, the egg industry, with this video just over 1 hour long, I literally said, that's it. I'm not doing anything else to harm animals. So I went vegan overnight and I haven't looked back. So also I'm the founder of Mindful Wealth. So Mindful Wealth is a company that helps people and companies with their financial planning. So as I mentioned before, these type of things are really exciting, but often they're very overwhelming and people don't know where to start. Everyone's has a different background and a different set of priorities and a different set of resources as well. So I look to take all of those goals and aspirations and plans, and I put that into a meaningful strategy, and I help people along the way as well. I do some speaking. I do VegFest last year and this year as well, podcasts, all sorts of things like that, just to have a conversation. I love to talk about this topic. And I've started a YouTube channel as well. So all of these bits are in the QR code. That's my plug over. But yeah, wherever I can share information and help people, that's what really motivates me. So why does it matter thinking about finance? Because a lot of the time people do prioritize what they eat, what they wear, and the makeup they're using. And those things are very important. But if you think about the power of money, everything, certainly in the Western world, starts with the exchange of money. So for most of us, unless we're quite a high level influencer, I haven't got 1 million subscribers yet on YouTube, nothing close to, our biggest power is as a consumer. So we've talked a lot, David's talked about, you know, the trends in the food industry, and in a similar way to us going into the supermarkets and the shops and voicing our power, saying we're not going to buy that, I want to buy the vegan option, we can do the same with our money. And there's a lot of money just in pensions alone. There's over 3 trillion. Every time I research, the number actually goes up. It's going up every day. It's actually about 3.75 trillion now. And this is just in pensions. Our money goes much further in many different areas. So we have the power to switch from a lot of these things here: tobacco, guns, fossil fuels. It's not only animal agriculture. The reason why I called my company Mindful Wealth is because a lot of us that are vegan, or what I call pre-vegan, maybe on the way, almost there, thinking about it, making steps, which is all fantastic, steps in the right direction. We care about the animals, but we also have other values that we want to align our actions with. And a lot of these industries are featured in most of the pensions that we don't even know about. So you wouldn't think about, probably most of you, investing in a company that sells guns, but by having pensions and by not really looking at where those pensions are invested, a lot of us are doing that. And that's the same with a lot of animal agriculture and a lot of these not very nice companies. So the good news is we have a real power to consciously move that money, and we're moving our money not just into alternative meats, which are really important. We've got loads of different examples that I'll share with you throughout these slides. So I'm really excited. Things are moving in the right direction. So this is an example of one of the fund managers that we work with. So within Mindful Wealth, we kind of sit in between the client, the customer, and the funds themselves. And part of my job is to look at the funds and to hold those fund managers to account. So I think it was Laurent earlier asked about why is there a specific company within that portfolio. That's spot on. Those are the types of questions we want to be asking. So there's really three different ways of looking at investing in terms of strategy when it comes to aligning our money with our values. Stewardship, you may have heard of. This is talking about encouraging the companies that are on that path, on that journey to doing better, to being more ethical, more sustainable, lowering their carbon footprint, maybe reducing or cutting out fossil fuels within the near future. Stewardship is all around investing in those companies and helping them along the way and using the influence of the fund managers and the influence of money and investment to help encourage those good behaviors. Divestment or divestment, that is basically the strategy where you say, no, I'm not going to invest in any company that supports any of these things that contradict my values. So therefore, I am making a conscious decision. I'm going to sell those shares, or I'm not going to invest in those companies, and I'm going to screen those out. And there are fund managers that help to screen out certain investments depending on what your preferences are and what your values are. And the last one is impact investing. So this is, for me, the most exciting strategy. And this is two-parter, really. It's, first of all, not investing in the bad things, so all of the screening I mentioned, but also it's looking at the money that you are investing. Is that investing in companies to make a positive impact as well? So there's two areas there. This is an example of something that can be produced with certain funds. This is an impact calculator. So we can input the amount of money you have to invest, and it's just a lot more interesting, a lot more engaging than simply saying, I'm investing in a sustainable investment. Actually, where is your money going specifically? What impact are you having with your money? And the good thing is, hopefully, as your investment grows, this impact will improve and get better as well. So talking a little bit about the environment, because a lot of people are also vegan for the environment. That number there is quite a large number, 330 million tons, which is the carbon footprint of our pensions. So just to explain that briefly, where we put our money, of course, has an impact because the companies that we are investing in, and it can be up to 1,500, 2,000 different companies. So people think of pensions as a single investment. That's far from the case. We have a large portfolio. Even if we're investing fully sustainably, there's loads of options. And those companies in turn have a carbon footprint. So we have a real opportunity here to actually lower our carbon footprints. I'm sure Dan will talk about that next individually, by having the investments in more sustainable places. Just to give you an idea here around, little bit around Europe and California as well, just to compare the different measures of carbon footprint, just so you can see how large that number is in comparison. And just like the impact calculator, we can measure your carbon footprint and how you can reduce that by taking your money from, if you can see on the right-hand side, the slightly bigger foot, the World Equity Index, which is a measure of the average standard pension, and moving it into a portfolio that's more impact and more sustainable. So just by moving, this is based, by the way, on £60,000. So I haven't done it on a £1 million of investment. The reason why I've chosen 60,000 is because in the UK, that's roughly the average pension size. So you can see there, you've got nearly a 10-ton CO2 reduction, so a 10-ton reduction in our carbon footprint just by switching our pension. So there's all sorts of different investments. I'll talk to you about two of the main ones. The first one being regulated investments. So those are ones that are regulated in the UK. It's the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. And that, as I say, is much more than pensions. You've got different types of savings, different types of investments, depending on what you need. So you might need one just for the future that you can't access. There might be investments that help you with tax. There might be investments that provide an income. So it all depends on what you want. But the good news is there are different sustainable options for virtually every regulated investment. And this quickly is a scale here. You can see on the left in the grey, because that's not good, traditional investments. Unfortunately, a lot of the we have in the UK auto enrolment, which is if you're working in the UK, you are put into a pension scheme by default. And unfortunately, most of the workplace default pensions that an employer would offer does sit in that left-hand side traditional, very not great investments. So one of the things that I have as a goal is to educate employers to make sure they can make a conscious decision to help us along this scale. So there's no right or wrong with this. People sit in different areas of this scale. Some people might at the start just want to be a bit more responsible with their investment, ranging all the way across to philanthropy, which is considered very dark green. And philanthropy means that you are investing, but not for a monetary return. You are investing for impact and you want to see a return, but you're not going to get a monetary return on your investment. And there's a company called the Global Returns Project that helps people invest in a portfolio in that way. The second part is unregulated investments. So many of you may have seen these companies on the left here, very popular companies in the UK. And these companies often raise money via what's called crowdfunding. So they will put a pitch out there and they'll say, here is our company. These are all the fantastic things that we're doing. And rather than having things like private equity or stock investments, they're looking at crowdfunding. So people like us can go on and we can invest smaller amounts. We don't have to invest thousands. We can sometimes invest as little as 10 or 20 pounds. And you have a stake in that company. So it's, I think, a very nice ethical thing to do, to have some of your company owned by people that believe in your company. With unregulated investments, they are considered higher risk because everything comes at a risk when it comes to investing. But there's also a higher reward with a lot of these investments. They have certain tax benefits and certain things that will help incentivize you as well. Beyond investing there on the right, beyond investing is a example of a portfolio that you can, rather than invest in, let's say, in One Planet Pizza, that's a big risk alone because all of your money is in that one company. If that company goes under, you've lost your investment. But a portfolio groups 6, 8, 10, 20 companies together, which means that you're spreading your risk as well. So, without further ado, 3 practical tips you can take away hopefully, and get started on your journey. Number one might not sound obvious, but finding lost money, finding the amount of people that say to me, I have pensions in the background, I don't know where they are, I don't know what they're doing, is staggering. There's 19 billion worth of pensions out there that are just unclaimed. So they're just being invested where they are, they're not being looked after, they're not being invested in a way that a lot of people would like. So there's a big opportunity. As well as pensions, there are lots of things that people just aren't looking at. So you can find savings and bank accounts that are lost, trust funds, investments, premium bonds, inheritances. There's so many things. So the first thing is doing some housekeeping and getting everything in the right order. So whether that's pen and paper or whether you do it on a spreadsheet, it's good to just spend a couple of hours on and off finding what you have and getting everything in the right place. Number two, once you have the information, it's all about taking action. So my friend Dan at Mother Tree will be presenting after me. He has a fantastic carbon calculator on his website, and also a lot of very good, credible information about banking statistics. So I've talked to a lot about pensions, but where people bank is as important. Banks are funding huge amounts of not only fossil fuels, but all sorts of companies that we probably don't agree with either. So taking action and switching your bank is actually one of the easiest things you can do. You can do it in the UK with a guarantee, probably takes about 15 minutes and it's done, and it's a long-term commitment. So that's really good to consider. And then switching your pension, savings, insert anything else here. This takes a little bit longer, but doesn't take years. I take people within my company through a process you can see there, all the way from a discovery call, which starts with actually finding out what you want to do. Because it's all very well and good having a sustainable pension, but you know, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve with that? Do you want to create a legacy that you can pass to your children and your grandchildren? Do you want to give back? There's all these different things to consider, as well as where your money is. And number three, the last one, is consider the bigger picture. So yes, it's important to have your investments in the right place. And that is a really, really big tick in the box. As I mentioned, most people don't even think about their finance. So just by doing that, you're really making a really positive long-term step. Things do change within the portfolios. There's hundreds and thousands of companies. Trends change, and things, as David mentioned earlier, you know, things like the home brand vegan options and meat alternatives, we've seen a big rise in consumption. So within the portfolios, things sometimes switch around and the risk changes and things like that. So part of my job as an advisor and the fund managers will look at the bigger picture by making sure these funds still work for you. So it's not just a case where you switch once and your investment will be forgotten about. It's a constant maintenance. It's like a nice, I say a classic car, but they're not great with polluting. So maybe a nice electric car, you need to maintain it, you need to service it, you need to make sure that you keep on top. So for you, considering the bigger picture is also about looking at the whole supply chain, if you like. So where your investments are is number one, which is great, but also where are you getting your advice from? Is the company only doing sustainable investments, or are they doing investments that are traditional, but they also tick a box? And there's no right or wrong answer with this. It's up to you to decide. But it's similar to in, you know, the vegan food world. I would much prioritize vegan only brands rather than a brand that happens to have a couple of vegan options. So yeah, who are you buying from and what are their values? It's taking that little bit of time before you start investing, wherever you're putting your money, to really understand that. We've also got, David mentioned earlier, very credible brands like the Vegan Society, which I'm pleased to announce as of yesterday, I'm now working with. So I'm looking after their financial planning. We've got Vegan Founded. Apologies, I haven't looked around Europe to see, but I'm sure there are equivalents wherever you're tuning in from as well. So what these companies do is they go quite heavily into the companies, into the products, into the services, and really try to work out the vegan credentials. So you can rest assured that you've got some extra credibility there, and some of the diligence and some of the questions have already been asked. And you also have here, I love this, the Vegan Business Tribe. So when we're considering the bigger picture, often when I look to do something for my company, so it's multi-layered this. So it's where you're investing, it's the company that's helping you invest in the right way, such as Mindful Wealth or Mother Tree. And what are the credentials behind that company? So where do they do their web hosting? Is that in a green way? Yes, you can get green web hosting as well. Big carbon footprint reduction. Are you going to companies that also share your values? So that's not only financials, that's everywhere. So somewhere like Vegan Business Tribe, which is a global networking group that I've been part of for over 18 months. I'm not on the payroll, so I haven't been paid. This is not a sponsored ad, but for me, it is perfect because everything I do, I want to align all of my decisions, not only for myself, but for my business with vegan businesses. And that has a knock-on effect in terms of economy, because I'm the money that I earn, I'm then passing that on to other vegan businesses. So it's a great little ecosystem. That's me. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, but there might be a couple of questions. I did not time that at all when I rehearsed that. So I'm unsure how much time we have left, but yeah, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jay. So we are going to see if we have questions. James, yes? No, nobody so far. Well, I have a question, Jay, relating to mindful wealth, and does the Financial Conduct Authority support you, or how does it work? I mean, when you are involved in in this kind of activity, can you get support from the financial market authorities, the same as we have in France?
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting one. So the FCA's role primarily is to look after the consumer, so to look after the investor and the client. So they put frameworks and rules and regulations in place for that. Interestingly, specifically, the SDRs, sustainable regulations, are coming in, which mean that there's going to be a labeling. So what we've found with a lot of funds are the same with a lot of other, unfortunately, you see it in the clothing industry, in the food industry, something is called green or plant-based or sustainable. And actually it's just a word, it's greenwashing, right? So they have come out with 3 different definitions of what something should look like. So going back to when I started, there's like the stewardship approach. So there are some funds that are going to be labeled sustainable improvers. So that might feature some companies that you wouldn't think as sustainable yet, but they are making actionable steps towards the right goal. And then you've got that ranging all the way across to the sustainable label, so the ones that are already sustainable. So yes, they do. They are trying to help. They're a little bit behind the curve, but anything that they do to help simplify for the consumer is welcome.
I'm going to see if there is a question. Otherwise, I can ask you another one. Since I focus on finance, I'm just wondering, there was a debate relating to whether animal welfare was good for returns, you know, so we saw with Elysabeth that her ETF outperformed the other indexes, and we have already seen with some famous persons relating to animal farming that you can improve welfare and have a good impact on the internal rate of return. Now, coming to what you said before, do you have people who really focus on a higher return, or do you have more persons who take the choice of philanthropy? And as you say, the return is more qualitative than quantitative.
That's a really good question as well. I think, so for me, I start with a discovery process, and I only help people that have some level of responsible investment strategy. So for those people that don't care where the money's invested, as long as the numbers look good, I don't help. But I'm pleased to say, out of everyone I've ever spoke to, and there's a lot of people with a lot of different channels through social media and networking and companies, there's only honestly less than 4 or 5 people I've ever spoke to that do say, I don't care. So the good thing is the scale before you get to philanthropy, which is a great thing to do, but for many of us, we are reliant on these investments to provide security and income for us, either now or in future. We can invest in a way that is more sustainable and ethical. And the returns part is very interesting because, of course, if we take a snapshot of the last year and a half, we do see big increases in fossil fuels because of the impact on the invasion from Russia and all sorts of political things. But actually, when we look at the bigger picture, over the next 20 or 30 years, and people come to me in their 50s and say, I'm retiring in 5 years, but you still need, you know, hopefully a 30-year plan because that income and that pot needs to be sustainable for future. So I think when we look at a wider view, a long-term view, the sustainable investments are going to outperform the traditional ones 100%. We do a lot of research and a lot of comparison, and there's generally, it's not a black and white thing. It's not just invest sustainably and lose money, or you've got to invest no holds barred and get a return. There's so many good points, including return, to sustainability. It's brilliant.
Thank you, Jay.
No problem.
Other questions? No, I don't see. I'm just checking the chat. So in that case, I'm going to welcome Dan. Dan is in Slovakia, but his company is UK, if I'm not wrong. So Dan, you are going to talk about your thrilling carbon calculator.
Ronnie, thanks so much for that introduction. I'm really great to be here. So I'm Dan. I'm the founder of Mother Tree, and you know, it's a real honor to follow such great speakers. So we're going to be going into the power of our finances, so kind of building on Elysabeth and Jay's work. We'll be looking at pensions and banking. But here's the good news. This is a half-hour talk, and then in half an hour you get a chance to grab your oat milk and your coffee and have a break, and then we'll return for the other bit. So do stay with me for these 30 minutes. Just before we get started, just going to make sure I can share my screen, share the presentation. Can everybody see? Everybody see
Yes.
that? Thumbs up.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, great. So first up, just a little bit of housekeeping. So please do try and keep your cameras on. It just makes for a much more engaging session, helps me to gauge the feedback of the room. If you're looking bored, I'll change up the content, that's totally fine. But it just makes it feel like it's a bit more in person. So if possible, do put your cameras on. And also do try and stay on mute. If you have a question, pop it in the chat. Like we will, as Veronique's had this whole time, we'll have time for questions at the end as well. And I may even pick up some as we go.
Dan, can you make it full screen or yes?
Oh yeah, well, I'm actually just going to come back because I want to ask a couple of questions before we get into the full presentation. So I'd like to sort of see people and just ask sort of two questions, which will really help me balance the content of what's coming up. So first up, when it comes to the climate crisis, to climate change, who here's ever felt a sense of, put a yes in the chat if you felt a sense of frustration or overwhelm or guilt. Pop a yes in the chat if you felt frustrated at just having the lack of time to live a greener lifestyle, or frustrated at the lack of action from big business, or if you felt overwhelmed by the amount of choice, the amount of greenwashing out there, or even a sense of guilt of not being green enough. And these things are vulnerable things to acknowledge. So I just want to say, acknowledge people who have said yes. So Jay, yes, thank you for your vulnerability there, for your courage, putting a yes on that. It is really important that we're able to see these actions, because this cluster of actions often stop us taking action on things like our finances. So we're going to unpack some of that later on today. The second question that I just want to ask, and again, just pop a yes in the chat if this is you. If you've ever looked at the carbon impact of your money, if you've ever looked at where your pension's being invested, pop a yes in the chat, kind of following on from what Jay was saying. Or if you've ever looked at the carbon impact of your bank account, put a yes in the chat. And equally, if you haven't looked at those things, feel free to put a no there. It's really just to help me get an understanding of the balance of the group and where to position some of the upcoming content. So we've got a yes from Christian, yes from Jay, yes from David, but only because of me and Jay. Well, thanks, David. I appreciate that. So 4 yeses. Okay, so I'm going to assume this group is fairly clued up. Right, so I'm going to flip back to the presentation based on those. And this time, Veronique, I will set it as a slideshow. So that should be easier to see once it's loaded.
Yes,
can everybody see that?
Yes, that's good.
Great. So a quick bit about me. So Mother Tree's mission is to make it easy for busy people to go green and save money. And we target finance, bills, and home improvement. For the best part of 2 years, we've been exploring the most impactful areas individuals can take to address the climate crisis. We've explored over 40 different actions that consumers can take action on. We've held over 250 hours of interviews. We've calculated thousands of carbon footprints, and we've realized that there are 2 actions above all else that have significant impact on the level of carbon emissions, on the amount of biodiversity we have on this planet, on the amount of vegan businesses we're able to fund. We've seen that from Elysabeth and Jay earlier on. Just by making sure your bank and your pension are invested ethically, you can dramatically cut your carbon footprint, often by 10 tons or more. And you can get money into places that you want to see thriving over the next 10 years without necessarily giving up returns or security of your money. And we're going to unpack that on this call. Our goal at Mother Tree is to move £1 billion into the green economy by 2025. And to that end, we launched Mother Tree's first product last year, which was the Money Carbon Calculator. It's the UK's first and only, possibly the world's first. Haven't come across one exactly like we're doing. So we're going to have a look at that later on. And we show you the carbon impact of your pension, your current account, and your savings accounts. We've worked with all kinds of business in the last year and a half. Our biggest one is Go Cardless, who are one of the leading fintechs in the UK, 900 employees. And we're looking at how their banks are investing and what that means for their carbon footprint. And we've shifted over £1 million into the green economy so far. So that's just in 1 year's kind of trading, we've shifted over £1 million. Two founders, that's me on the left, I'm Dan. On the right, that's my co-founder, Craig. The little baby in the picture, that's Theo. A little bit more about him later on. These are some of the products that we've done at Mother Tree. So on the left is the result of a carbon footprint, of a money carbon calculation, your money's carbon footprint. On the right, we publish a bank league table in the UK. So we want to get absolute transparency on what the UK banks are doing. We do look at international banks as well. We've looked at banks in France, we've looked at banks in Denmark, in Canada. It really depends on the clients we work with. But we want to be able to show consumers, clients, absolute clarity on what their money is actually doing to this planet. Before launching Mother Tree, I was on the founding team of Look After My Bills. Look After My Bills had the best ever deal on Dragon's Den. We switched over 800,000 UK households to better energy deals and saved them £127 million in the process. The two dragons who came onto our team were Ted Shlavani, Jenny Campbell. We actually had a bid for more 5 dragons, but we went with those two. Towards the end of my time at Look After My Bills, my wife became pregnant. And it made me really question where I was spending my time. We'd sold the company by that point to Go Compare, and I was working for Go Compare, very comfortable job. But I just felt, when my son Theo grows up, he's going to ask me, what did I do when I realized the extent of the climate crisis? And I want to be able to tell him I did all I could with the skills that I had. And so I left my really comfortable job at Go Compare, and I started researching what has now become Mother Tree. I started by just interviewing people one-on-one in their homes over Zoom, just getting an understanding of how they are feeling about what's going on in this world and the actions that they're taking. Then I started running focus groups, and on a walk in the forest with my wife, she came up with the idea of the climate challenge. The climate challenge back then was 30 days, 30 challenges with a view to just discovering ways we could live more sustainably. We went vegan for the day. We were trying to get people signed up to David's vision of being vegan. We got rid of single-use plastic. We looked at our carbon footprint. And the thing that shocked people the most was what was happening with our banks and where our pensions were being invested. And me included. The first time I went through the climate challenge, this part of it was new for me. And I realized 2% of my pension was going to oil and gas. It was invested in Shell and BP. 1% was in tobacco, with British American tobacco. 1% was in weapons. These are just things that I would never choose to put money towards, never choose to invest in. And yet every month, some of my hard-earned cash have been going there. And so that's what we're going to unpack on this call. Now, before we really get into the impact of our money, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of how we got to this point in the climate crisis. So it's going to be a little bit like a GCSE geography lesson. I'm not sure quite how that translates into French. Maybe it's the baccalaureate. It's about when you're 15 years old. It's going to be a kind of lesson like that, but I promise to keep this section super brief. So for the last 10,000 years, we've had remarkably stable temperatures, and that's allowed life on this earth to flourish. Pre-10,000 years, the far left of this graph, it just took a 3-degree temperature change, minus 3-degree global temperature change to trigger the Ice Age. Most of Northern Europe was covered in glaciers. And then the Industrial Revolution kicked in. From 1760, we saw factories and steam trains and later cars, and then our whole way of life became underpinned by fossil fuels. It led, in general, to a better standard of living, but it's come at a cost. The energy we needed to make this revolution happen and then maintain it generates a huge amount of carbon dioxide emissions. And I'm using carbon dioxide as a kind of catch-all term for other gases like methane. Those gases build up in our atmosphere and act as a greenhouse. You might well have heard the term greenhouse gases. Well, they trap heat in the earth, and that's led to dramatic global temperature rise in the last 200 years. And it's had huge implications. In the last 10 years, we've seen record floods, record droughts, record forest fires. And it's become clear, given this crisis, that politicians are simply not doing enough, that banks and pensions are continuing to invest heavily in fossil fuels and factory farming, in practices that are against the vegan way of life and damaging our planet. And I don't know about you, but when I see these stats, I sometimes feel helpless. Even if you sort of go vegan and you quit flying, it sometimes just doesn't feel enough. And we realize through these hundreds of hours of user interviews, through really deeply listening to people, that there's this genuine sense of fog. frustration, overwhelm, guilt, which is the questions we asked at the start of this call. Only Jay said yes to these, but I'm willing to bet other people have felt an element of these, a fact of frustration of not having the time it takes to make the required changes, frustration at big business and politicians for simply not playing their part, a sense of overwhelm of the amount of choice and the amount of greenwashing, and how do you know a company's right for you and also doing good for this planet, and also not using animal-based products, a sense of guilt of not being green enough. And, you know, hands up, I continue to experience these feelings from time to time. And this cluster of feelings stops people from taking action. It's actually a negative feedback loop. The worse the situation, the less we want to act. And that only enhances our feelings of fog. Now, one way to address these deep-rooted feelings is to look at our carbon footprint, our personal actions in terms of what we can do to live sustainably. That's where we started with the climate challenge 18 months ago. We looked at our carbon footprint, and as a group, we took action. We had people who switched to vegan diets. We had people who gave up flying. We had people who switched to oat milk from cow's milk, all sorts of action. But despite this focus on the sort of traditional 4 areas, how we set up our home, what our diet consists of, how we get around, and stuff, which is a catch-all term for things like clothes, cosmetics, electronics, despite the focus on that, something was missing. Our finances were not included. And really, as Jay's already said, this underpins all of the things that we buy in this society. They're funding, they're getting funding from banks, from pension providers. So even if we decide not to eat meat, our pension, our bank might still be invested in it. And that's where we really zoomed in. And we found some shocking results. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and ask a question, although my mouse has disappeared. Why can't I do that? There we go. Right, we're back. So I'm going to ask a question. If we take up all the money in the world, if we took up pensions and property, the money that's in investment in the stock market, the cash under pillows, if we grouped all of that up together and we put a percentage figure on how much of that is contained in pensions, put your guess in the chat. How much do you think, in terms of all the world's money that there is, how much is in pensions today in a percentage term? Anybody willing to take a guess? David says 10%. Anyone wanting to go higher or lower or that? Feels like a bit of an auction. Jay's put 20%. Jay's gone higher than David. Anyone else want to be courageous and put a guess in the chat? Go on, have a swing. 39% from Abundance. 33% from Gabby. Okay. Well, the answer is actually 50%. I was absolutely blown away when I realized this. 50% of the world's money is in pensions. And that means if you have a pension, if you are on an employee pension, or if you have a pension from a previous employer, then you have skin in this game. And if you had just £10,000 in a pension and you haven't looked at it before, on average, that means you've already contributed £400 to oil and gas companies. And if you're lucky enough to have £100,000 in a pension, that means on average, you've contributed £4,000 to oil and gas. And looking at it in carbon terms, if you had a £50,000 pension built up over 10 years, which is just quicker than the UK national average, that produces 10 tons of carbon per year. To match that impact, you'd have to give up flying, go from eating a heavy meat diet to a completely meat-free diet, and stop driving every single year just to match that impact. And that's money that instead of going to oil and gas, could be going to renewable energy, affordable housing, and clean water. And it's a really similar story when we examine factory farming. In fact, we had a look at the UK's leading pension providers to see what they were doing when it comes to factory farming and divestment. Divestment means they've agreed not to fund it anymore. They've agreed to get their funds out of factory farming. Only one provider is doing that at the moment. That's Aviva. All the other major providers have not divested from factory farming. That means unless you've checked where your pension is, it's highly likely that it's investing in practices like factory farming and practices against the vegan lifestyle. And what we realized is that along with making, our clear actions in the market in terms of taking a vegan diet and stopping flying, it's really important to make sure they're matched by what we're doing with our money. And it doesn't stop at pensions. When we examine the banks, the UK's leading banks, that's Barclays, HSBC, Santander, Lloyds, and NatWest, and their affiliated brands like First Direct and Halifax. Those big banks put in £114 billion into oil and gas in 2021. It didn't get much better last year. And the world's 60 biggest banks, which includes those banks, it includes some leading French banks as well, such as BNP Paribas. The world's 60 biggest banks fund fossil fuel expansion 50 times more than the oil and gas companies themselves. To put that another way, for every pound that Shell and BP put towards fossil fuel expansion, the banks are putting in £50. In short, without the bank's money, oil and gas really would be a thing of the past. The campaigner Bill McKibben, I think, summed it up perfectly. Money is the oxygen that keeps fossil fuel burning. And actually, this also applies to big business. So when we examined, the leading brands, the leading businesses in the world, Apple, Google, Microsoft, when we looked at what they were doing with their cash, we had a really shocking result. Let's take Google and its parent company, Alphabet. So Google keeps a whole bunch of cash in banks for acquisitions, for paying employees, for tax purposes. And that cash, based on how those banks are investing, has a carbon footprint. Well, that carbon footprint is bigger than Google and Alphabet's carbon footprint for their entire supply chain. And it's a really similar story when we look at any given big brand, we're seeing the same result. PayPal, their carbon footprint, when you include their cash, is 55 times higher than their reported carbon footprint. Google, the example I gave, it's actually 38 times higher. It's not just double, it's 38 times. And Netflix, 10 times higher. And what applies to these big businesses also applies to us. If you have a bank account, then you have skin in this game. Just £10,000 in a Barclays current account, which is just under the UK average, produces 2 tons of carbon per year. And, unfortunately, it doesn't get better for Barclays when we consider the impact they're having in terms of a vegan world. I'm not sure if anybody's heard of JBS. I hadn't when I was researching this. JBS are known as the world's biggest butcher. Founded in Brazil in the 50s, they now have over 250,000 employees, revenue surpassing $50 billion, and they're one of the largest meat processors in the world, the top 5 food and beverage company globally, and they just produce meat. They're just a kind of massive butcher. Well, Barclays have identified as the world's largest creditor to JBS for the last 7 years. Up until last year, the results for this year haven't come out, but Barclays have provided more corporate loans, more bond issuances, and revolving credit facilities to JBS, more than any other global institution in the world. So not only are they doing bad in terms of oil and gas, they're doing bad in terms of getting us off our meat addiction. And here's the really crazy thing. You get less returns in general from providers who are most heavily investing in fossil fuel and factory farming. It actually pays to go green. When we looked at Triodos, who are the greenest bank in the UK, based on our analysis, they're on the far right of this chart. So for every £1,000 you invest, they're producing the smallest amount of carbon dioxide, of carbon emissions. Triodos, when we looked at the interest rate earlier this month, they're outperforming Barclays, HSBC, all the big banks, in fact, they're outperforming them on interest rate. Yes, they're a Dutch-founded bank, so I know the really sharp vegans here will know they do have investments in the meat industry, in the dairy industry, given their sort of Dutch roots. So if you wanted to avoid that altogether, you could look at Nationwide, who we also looked at. Nationwide, bricks and mortar bank. They provide mortgages. That's their lending side of their bank. Their interest rate is beating Barclays at the moment as well, and they're actually providing switch incentives. So it pays to go green. And it's a very similar story with pensions, as Jay and as Elysabeth have already unpacked for us. When Mother Tree examined pensions and we verified genuinely green pension funds, We looked into exactly what they were investing in so we could verify them. There was no greenwashing. And then we compared them under the same provider for the provider's default fund. And if you're with an employee pension, you're likely on the default fund. If you haven't looked at where it's going, if you haven't changed from where your company's picked. Well, the green pension funds for the last 5 years have outperformed the default funds by about 15%. Now, just to sort of reiterate Jay's point, this is not financial advice. We're looking historically at the performance of the market. But isn't that kind of crazy? We get less money for the more carbon dioxide we put into the world. And I just want to take a pause here to give us a chance to think about, for you to think about where your money is going and what that means in terms of fossil fuel and practices that you agree with or perhaps not when it comes to living a vegan lifestyle. And if you're feeling that frustration or that guilt that your bank or your pension is a heavy funder of fossil fuel and oil and gas, then I want to make it really clear. One, you're absolutely not alone. This is a very new area of research. It's only been in the last few years. It's absolutely not your fault. The banks deliberately make this opaque. They don't want us to question where our money's going. But now we know the impact. We can start to have a deeper look at what that means. If you were to invest into places that you genuinely believe in, what does that actually mean? Well, if you put just £12,500, if you took it out of Barclays and put it into a greener bank, over the next 10 years, we'd see a reduction of 26 tons of carbon. That's the equivalent of 140 flights from London to Rome and back. You have to fly 14 times for a 2-hour flight every year to match that impact. It's also a chance with that money to make sure it's aligned to your values, to make sure it's being invested in vegan projects. We've supported countless vegan projects already with that £1 million we've shifted into the green economy. One of them is Farmers for Stock-Free Farming. And it's a chance to make sure there's transparency on where your investments are going. For the UK, this is one that Triodos produced. They show you at street level the companies that they're funding, which means that money's going into the local communities, local projects. And in fact, we recently finished work with a client, Alex, who was super passionate about biodiversity and making sure his funds were not investing in meat industries. But his most important criteria was the security of his funds. And our research on his pensions and banks focused really deeply on those three aspects: promoting biodiversity, taking money out of the meat industry, making sure his money is as secure as before. And that meant we were able to find him credible, reliable alternatives that ensure the security of funds, that give him peace of mind on his investments, and are now supporting the projects that he genuinely wants to see thriving in this world. Since launching Mother Tree, we've had clients move money to ensure investment in wind farms, like the one on the bottom left of this slide, in Ecotricity. We've had money go to affordable housing, to community projects across the UK, across the EU, across the world. We've seen this money going. And just imagine if you're able to look back in 10 or 20 years, or perhaps even further, 30 or 50 years, and you're able to say, with certainty what your money did to create in this world. Because ultimately for me, that's why I'm doing it. When I look back, when I retire 40, 50 years, well, probably sooner than that, I want to be able to sit down with my son and say I had a genuine positive impact on this planet. And if you're feeling like you want to get that cash switch, that's great. When we first kicked off this project, when we launched the UK's Money Carbon Calculator, we thought people would start switching in droves. Once we knew the impact of our money, we thought people would take action. It's simply not true. We're held back by other reasons. It does take time to switch our cash. It takes time to think about where you want that money to go. We see people holding back because they are genuinely worried about the security of their money. Understandably so. This is money that needs to support us in a long time into our future. And there's also an understanding, they simply don't know where to go. They simply don't know the alternatives that are out there. And that's why we set up what we call the Green Living Service. So we designed the service to take customers who are experiencing that fog, frustration, overwhelm, guilt, and take them to a place of genuine peace of mind and clarity in terms of where their money is going. We work with busy professionals who want to be greener but don't necessarily have the time, but they want the best option for their pension, for their current account, for their savings account, for their mortgage, for their insurance. We look at a whole bunch of areas, you know, the kind of hassle areas for clients, but they want to make sure those areas are aligned to their values without giving up the security. And look, it's clearly not rocket science to search for these deals, but it does take time. And we live in a really busy sort of moment in human history. Life seems busier than ever before with work, social lives, with kids, and trying to stay healthy. It's tough at times. And that's what we want to take this worry away from clients. That's what we do. We work really hard to understand your values, your budget, and your current situation. And then we scour the market for the best providers that match your values, save you money, and reduce carbon. We provide a detailed plan in terms of what that means to take action on it. And then we take action on your behalf. It's what we did at Look After My Bills. We scaled that to over 800,000 customers, switching people consistently and accurately and regularly. Well, we're bringing those learnings into Mother Tree as well. So we take even the hassle of switching away from you. It's having a phenomenal impact. We've got over 2,000 users of the Mother Tree suite of services. We've saved over 250 tons of carbon so far. Our record carbon reduction is 18 tons. At an individual level, you know, we save clients on average 40 hours of research time. And that's a whole working week. We save them on average £3,000 per year. Every year, we're looking at that. And so if you wanted to find out more, if you're feeling inspired by learning about what your money's doing for this planet, then, you know, head over to mymothertree.com. It's a free resource to find the carbon impact of your money. If you'd like to chat about maximizing your positive impact on the Green Living Service, do book a call. It typically takes just 15 minutes to unpack you know, your current situation and what you want to achieve. The reason we have that call is we only work with clients who we're confident we can have a genuine positive impact with. That's just really important for us because we're impact first. And please do connect on LinkedIn. If you've disagreed with anything I've said, I'd love to continue the debate. We're going to have questions now, but also, you know, feel free to connect on LinkedIn and tell me that. We love that feedback. It really helps us learn and grow as a company as well. And equally, if you support it, head over to LinkedIn and support it. Thank you so much for listening. Really enjoyed being here. I'm going to hand back over to Veronique. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Then I'm just going to see if we have questions here. I have I have a question relating to the calculator. So you are not going to explain everything about your calculator, I guess, but it's something you can. You need to meet the person who wants to improve his or her management of banks accounts, etc. And your calculations are based on information given by your client, information that you get from the banks and pension funds. Well, because it sounds simple, but I guess it's a bit intricate. And second thing, do you think you can do it, for instance, in other countries like France? Because I think it's an important topic.
Yeah. So the answer to that second one is yes. We can definitely do it in other countries. We've analyzed banks in France and Denmark, in Canada and the US. At the moment, we have to do that on an individual basis. We simply don't have the resource to do the amount of research it takes to build that table that I showed in other countries. But if somebody wanted us to do the analysis, we can do that in other countries on a one-off basis. And then your first question about the method. So from a consumer side, all you have to pop in is the name of your bank and just roughly how much you have in that bank in terms of current account, savings account, and similar questions for pensions. The calculations behind it are complex. We use the bank's own publications. So we start with what the banks are telling the public, and then we build on that. We add in other publicly available resources to understand where they're investing and what the carbon impact of those investments are. We're also able to look at other impacts, as you've seen, like factory farming. We can go very deep into different areas, but we started with carbon. And so we're able to build up a carbon footprint of the bank. And given we know how much you have with that bank, you have a proportion of that carbon impact that's attributed to you. Does that explain it?
Yes, that's good. I'm going to see if there are other questions. Nobody has a question so far. Just checking the chat. So maybe we are going to have the digital break, which is a digital coffee break. We'll start at 11:30, and we will have two very important topics, which will be veganism in France with Banque Publique d'Investissement. And after that, we'll move to ESG in the food and beverage industry with Maria Stoica. So enjoy a small digital break, and we begin at 11:30. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's begin.
Hi. Can I pay for the tea and the cereals, please? Yeah, the no one is here. I need to go.
Yeah, a button in the
I can give you the money.
but I can't. You can pay
I think we are going to begin quite soon. 1 minute. 1 minute to go on with the webinar. So we are going to have two very important topics. The first topic is related to France. Well, France, everybody knows that you have a lot of meat eaters, and personally, I'm aware of this because I was born in Limousin, and Limousin, maybe some of you know, it's Limousin is very famous for meat and of course animal farming. So I'm going to give the floor to Ariane. Ariane, are you ready for your presentation? We're just going to wait maybe a few minutes because the break was a bit short. I'm just going to contact Ariane to see if she's ready.
Hello, good morning.
So welcome, Ariane. Welcome, Ariane. Thank you for being with us today. So I leave you the floor.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you for your invitation. Ariane Bouyadziakis, I'm the Agri-Food Tech Manager at BPI France. BPI France is the French state-owned bank, public bank, and I will show how we support vegan innovation in France. So first, who we are in a few words. So we are owned by the French state. Our mission is to support companies who run a business in France. We have regional offices all over France. We are more than 2,500 employees, and we support every year 80,000 companies all over France. We provide to these companies various financial tools, beginning with innovation, supporting R&D projects, then loans, guarantee, private equity, and support for export. So it's a large continuum of financial tools in order to help companies to grow. Coming to our subject, I have here data from Alfano, which shows that France ranks 5th in the world for agri-food tech investments for last year. So we are very proud to be one of the top leaders countries in the world for agri-food tech. The first one are United States, followed by India, United Kingdom, which is also a very strong country for agri-food tech, China, and then France. How that is possible? Thanks to a large ecosystem of venture capital funds. You have here a picture of all the funds which are dedicated to financing food tech in France. And on the bottom, you have also the funds from BPI France, the home funds, which invest in food tech. So you know all these figures, but why we need to diversify our diet? Because breeding is responsible for 15% of greenhouse gas emissions, and a big part of water, of land, is used for growing plants in order to feed animal husbandry. And animal husbandry is responsible for a big part of deforestation around the world. And as the world population will continue to grow to reach 10 billion people in 2050, the demand of proteins will also grow in the same way. So we need to diversify our diet in order not to damage more the environment. So food tech work for that, providing plant-based and many other products we will see in order to meet this challenge. But they face also 4 main challenges for their development. The first one is technical and industrial challenge in order to scale up their innovations, to bring their plants to operational. That needs a lot of efforts and they need a lot of money. So you have also a financial challenge. As we talked this morning, the regulatory challenge is also very tough because of novel food regulation in Europe. Every disruptive innovation has to meet to comply to novel food regulation, which is very demanding, very costly, and it takes a lot of time to get novel food approval in Europe, and it's very costly. And finally, there is a marketing challenge also for all this innovation, especially for insects, which are not very well accepted in Western countries. So they have to, the companies have to develop marketing strategy to put their products on the market. Despite of all those challenges, we have a lot of startups in France working on alternatives to meat, more than 50 startups in these fields. We published this study on our website. You can find this mapping. We did a survey last year with many partners. So some examples of plant-based companies. I hope you still hear me because my connection is not very well, so I switch off my camera. So first, on plant-based companies, you have Harry & Co, which develops ready-made meal coming from beans and French peas from lentils grown in France, which are very nutritious and can deliver a complete meal in this matter. Then on the left, you have also Yumgo, which provides a substitute for egg. This preparation can be used for making cakes and is very comparable to egg. And coming to meat substitute, you have a wide range of companies. First, Happivore on the middle. Then you got Umiami, who managed to produce a fillet of chicken. As you see, it's not only minced meat, it's something very comparable to real poultry. And then you have on the right, Acro, which makes also mincemeat and many ready-made food from plant-based. And you also may know La Vie, which offers plant-based bacon. And Kokiriki is also a company for poultry, for fried poultry, made from plant-based. So, however, plant-based ingredients may have green flavor, some off notes, as we say in the jargon, means that the taste may not be very nice. So fermentation, which is a process well known since the antiquity, is a very long known process, helps to get rid of these off flavors and allows, for instance, les nouveaux affineurs to make plant-based cheese, which are very comparable from the taste, from the texture to real cheese. And you may have also the company Yeasty, which valorize the yeast after making beers. This yeast can be valorized in to make substitutes for meats and is very interesting for circular economy, as the yeast, which is a rubbish, becomes a new food. And precision fish fermentation is the step forward after fermentation, as is new technology coming from biotechnology. The process consists in fermentating GMOs, bacteria, transforms bacteria, which will produce the protein of interest. So in this case, you have 3 companies named Standing Ovation, Bon Vivant, and Nutropie, which, thanks to this process, produce caseins. Caseins in the major component of cheese. And so thanks to bacteria, they can produce this component. After they put other ingredients, vegan ingredients, in order to make this cheese with no dairy, no milk at all. And these cheese are really exciting. They really look like real cheese, like the French real cheese, not only the melted cheese as very industrial melted cheese, but we can find again real gastronomy cheese from this process. Then there is a field linked to algae in order to make plant-based salmon, or to make fried fillets of fish, or to make various foodstuff with the company Algama. And algae are very interesting because they are very nutritious. They have many minerals. They also have proteins, and that allow to make this plant-based fish for people who still want to eat fish plant-based, rich also in unsaturated fatty acids. And there is also a very disruptive technology, cellular agriculture, cultural meat, which is a way to produce meat cells in a fermentator without any slaughtering of animals. So it's friendly to well-being of animals, thanks to these cells which are grown in the fermentators. Companies like Vita Meat make fried chicken, and Gourmet manage to make foie gras. I don't know if you like foie gras, but this technology allows to make cultural foie gras without force-feeding goats, and that is very good for the well-being of animals, and no slaughterings, of course. Finally, the last field is insects, and in France we have major companies in this industry with Agronutris, Insect, Innovafeed, who raised a lot of money. France is one of the top leaders in this industry, mainly for animal feeding, and it's a huge stake to feed animals without soya, which is, as we said, responsible for deforestation. So these insects provide an alternative mainly to soya and to fishes, which are small fishes which are given to fish breeding. And so first, in another way, you have Tomujo, which puts so these insects for pet food, and cats and dogs love insects. And on the right, you have also Jiminy's, who offers grilled crickets for those who love to have fan food. Well, that's it for this overview of France food tech. And if you have any questions, I would be glad to answer. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ariane. Thank you, Ariane. Thank you for this presentation. I have seen one in the chat. Yes, insects are considered as animals, so it's we are not going to open the debate about insects just now. I wanted to ask you if you could talk about Pacte 2030, because you have, you finance vegan activities, and I think it's included in the Pacte 2030.
Yes, in this governmental plan for supporting innovation, we support agri-tech, food tech, and plant-based is a part of this innovation. So we support any good project in this field. And of course, insects are not plant-based, but there are a solution for deforestation, for sustainable development. So we support a lot of insects too.
And what is your vision of the development of the vegan market? Because in fact, you asked previously, yeah. I think you asked David, but since you are in agro-food, you are at BPI, I think you have also your vision, and maybe you can tell us more about what you think.
So as we can see, there are many companies and a lot of companies coming to the market, to the French market with these innovations, which are some of which are very disruptive. French people are more flexitarian than they used to be. They have also concerns about their healthy diet, about well-being. So as I asked this morning, we lack some data about the French consumption, but certainly the vegans are less, vegan diet is less than in other countries like Germany or UK. Which are more used to these kind of products. And also in France, we have a big agriculture sector and many farmers who are completely opposed to these vegan products. And it's a very touchy political topic. We see very often farmers demonstrating against these plant-based, against cultured meat, and there are lobbies working against this innovation, unfortunately, in France. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to share the situation of other countries to have this discussion.
I have a question. I see a question in the chat for you, Ariane. Are there in France any initiative to support farmers for transitioning from animal agri to crops?
No, there are no such initiatives. Recently, La Cour des Comptes, which is a French institution which is very famous and makes reports for the French state, published a report saying that we need to lower the livestock in France. And this report get a lot of bad reactions. And there is no initiative, there is no any political will to make this transition easier for farmers.
Okay, so it means at the moment you have intensive farming, you have bio farming, or farming which is more focused on animal welfare with a rating of animals, and the products, and you have separate vegan activities, and and do you intend to do something in the future for that? Because at one point, I think if we relate to COP decisions, what they said about temperature, etc., maybe we need to move on to less intensive farming. I was also thinking of some parts of France. So I am in Limousin, where we have now vegan things, but now Limousin is not so much intensive farming because we have meadows for animals. But maybe in Brittany, it might be a question because you have very intensive farming, which is also polluting. So you have a welfare of animals, yes, and you have pollution, which is quite important there.
Mm. Yes, but it's true that in France, what we can say is there is less intensive farming than in other countries, like in Denmark, in the Netherlands, or in Germany, because you have more space and you have more cows in the land, in free. They are outside in the countryside. So these cows, in fact, they pollute less. They are useful for fertilization of the soils. So there is also a tradition of husbandry in France, which is not so polluting than intensive breeding. And what was your question? Sorry.
Yes, it was related. I was thinking of Brittany specifically, because Brittany, you have very intensive farming, pig farming. I'm not talking about geese and ducks and hens, etc. But you have, let's say, pig farming, which is very intensive and causing a lot of problems. In addition to animal welfare.
Okay, but we BPI France, we do not support only vegan. We don't have only this field of support, and we also support. Last year we supported a project aiming to reduce the footprint of livestock. So this is a digital application which will help breeders, farmers, to reduce their footprint, because there are ways also for reducing this footprint, for working on the feed of animals, working of the time they spend in meadows, and there are many means also for reducing animal footprint. So we support also this kind of innovation.
Okay. So well, it means that you focus on both sides. I mean, trying,
yes,
not suppressing animal farming, but also financing vegan activities. Which means, as you said, you are more in a flexitarian option, maybe.
Yes. We are, as a state bank, we do not have any any main. We're not on the one side or the other. We are completely neutral, and we support all sustainable innovations of any kinds.
And I have seen that, I think I discussed with you, Ariane, that you have supported the European vegan certification. That's what they said. You have supported the European vegan certification, the EV, yes, for which gives a vegan certification to a production process, can be food or other activities.
Yes.
Now, about your relation with European Commission, because at the European level, I know we have decisions. So, do you think France is in line with European decisions, or we are more backwards, or what do you think? Because they are also taking decisions relating to animal welfare and vegan market. What is your feeling relating to that?
Well, there is, of course, the European policy is France have to comply with the European agricultural policy. But as I said, there are many oppositions of farmers in France against pesticides bans, against many many rules leading to more open space, to more sustainable agriculture. So things are not easy to implement in France. In fact, yes.
Véronique, you are mute.
Sorry, I was talking to Danesh because I've seen that he wrote something related to public funding. So Danesh, can you talk about it, or yes, maybe ask Ariane about it, maybe.
I was responding to Gabi's message, and it's an interesting topic that on one side we are talking about need of higher investments from public as well as private sector going into sustainable food sector or industries, and on the other hand, from a lot of public funding is going towards initiatives in food sector specifically, which are not sustainable. Whether we call it animal agriculture, seafood, or insect, doesn't matter. How do we draw the lines, and how do we make it like the real transition? Because you're kind of funding on one hand to cause the harm, and then on the other hand you're trying to fund to reduce the harm, but it's not going to work if there's a leakage on the bottom of the vessel, right?
Yes, but we cannot do the revolution of all things right now. Some fields will go more progressively to the level we want they go. So the transition cannot be completely disrupted from one day to the other. And as we said, we need also to help farmers for this transition. And we will, even if you are vegan, many people on the earth are not vegan, and they are for the moment flexitarian. And we need also to provide to this flexitarian sustainable food, and with a lower food print. And I think that also the transition might be progressive, and we have to support any initiative in this way. And the fact of opposing the people of vegan and not vegan will not bring us to the solution we all need.
I think that the point was not
opinion.
about. I think the point was not about people's individual preferences, but more of the industry as a whole supporting initiatives which are non-sustainable at all. It was more from that point of view. Whether it is soya farming or even animal farming does not matter, but if that program itself is not sustainable, in fact producing more of carbon or natural waste and whatnot, any amount of funding adding on to trying to make it sustainable will not help. That was the main point, and not about individuals' preferences.
Yes. But as a public banks, of course, we have many engagements towards the climate. And every project we support, either in agriculture or industry, have to meet some specifications in the environment. And also we follow the impact of every project in all the environmental ways. So every project is analyzed through these climate impact KPIs.
Ariane, I have a question from Vandine Tran. Vandine.
Hi, Ariane. This is Vandine Tran. Hi, everyone. Vandine Tran from Vegan Finance. So I have listened to you, and you said that you have not a leverage on changing things due to a lack of policy, if I've well understood. You have mentioned the Cour des Comptes, and so I understand it's there's a top-down approach, and you don't have you have to apply a policy, but do you have some degree of freedom to from a bottom-up approach to say, okay, maybe we should finance agricultural transition and help farmers who want to become vegan or to change their business? Do you have any possibility to do that, or to raise this awareness among your bosses?
Mm-hmm. So our job is not to support farmers. Well, there are other institutions in France and Europe in order to support farmers. We support innovation in the farming field. But we have this freedom, happily. For instance, cultivated meat, the French state is opposed to cultivated meat. But despite of that, we have supported it because we believe it's a disruptive technology. And voilà, we still have our freedom to support every disruptive innovation, but it's not our job to support farmers, because there is the European agriculture policy is here for that.
Okay, thank you. And do you feel any pressure from the government or from your bosses, I would say, to prevent you from financing vegan innovations in some way?
No, vegan innovation is very, voilà, we have to be cautious for different things, that the companies have not to say that this is meat or this is vegan meat. The term of meat is banned for this kind of product. They don't have to make any confusion for consumers. But the French state supported a lot of vegan plant-based innovation. And lastly, the French Minister of Economy visited one of these companies, Happyvore, and said that this is a very good company for sustainable development, for lowering footprint. So we have the support of the French state for supporting vegan innovation.
I heard that following his comment, he received lots of bad comments from the lobbies.
Yes.
Meat lobbies.
Yes, is what I said before. There are many oppositions, but I think that it's our responsibility to train, to inform farmers that we need to change, because the global diet will change, because there is a climate urgency to change our ways of consuming. And it is our responsibility to help farmers to change.
Thank you very much.
We have to have these this frank talk with farmers. Otherwise, unfortunately, they will lose their markets, and it's bad for them because they're doing a really good job. Farmers in France work in many countries, in fact, work a lot of hours. They are paid very less, very low. So they're doing a very good job for cultivating lands, for feeding people. So we have to support them and to help them change or move it through this transition.
Is there another question? Yes. I think somebody wanted to go. No other question for Ariane? Okay. Thank you very much, Ariane. Thank you so much. Now we are going to focus on ESG in food and beverages with Maria. So hello, Maria, welcome. I think Maria is going to prepare.
Yes, hello everyone. I was just, hi, can you see me?
Thank you. Hello, Maria.
Hi everyone. I was just about to put the vegan finance webinar background on the back. Sorry for that. Yes, so I'm going to share screen my presentation, if that's okay.
Yes, great.
Oops. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Please let me know if you can see this.
Very good. We can see it full screen.
Okay, amazing. So hi everyone, my name is Maria Stoica. I am an environmental and sustainability advisor. I want to congratulate everyone for being open-minded to attend this session today. I dialed in and out, and I saw you've been very passionate and had amazing questions so far. So this is my presentation. It's about bringing environmental, social, and governance consideration and assessment methods for the food and beverage industry. Just want to say that you can find me to my email address or on LinkedIn as well by my name. And there is going to be some image, or particularly one image with some graphic content. So whoever is not comfortable with that moving forward, you just should be aware of it. So I will go to my next slide now. Quite a busy one, but to start with, so in the ESG, in the S area, I would like to bring to you just 3 points for the S aspect, social aspect, and social considerations in the food and beverages sector, particularly related to plant-based veganism, but also animal protein, and practices. So you might have people that you know, family, friends, or you might have heard of people working in abattoirs and slaughterhouses, and you have here an image, a footage from a slaughterhouse in Wales, in a sheep slaughterhouse. So you can see the people, how they work in the conditions that people work in with animals in abattoir is quite distressing and really not natural to seeing the animals seeing the animals, how they fight maybe for their lives, or how they show opposition to what's happening to them. So just want to bring to you that concept of not just the animals themselves, but also the people that have to work in abattoirs and slaughterhouses. And there are people, usually immigrants or no education, or people that are marginalized, that don't have other opportunities, and they usually suffer from the post-traumatic stress disorder known as PTSD, which happens to veterans from wars as well. And communities with workers or in slaughterhouses usually have also higher crime rates or higher violence, domestic violence, and others. So that's one side of the social, the human side, and the fact that it's not just the animals, it's also the people that work in these industries that are affected. And then another concept here in the middle about ego and eco, you know, and you can see how humans, we feel we are at the top of the chain, but then we actually really are just part of life. And how PETA is defining the speciesism as the human health belief. It's just a belief that all other animal species are inferior to us, and then therefore we have the right to use them for our own interests. And this is really a way of kind of an entitlement way of seeing the world and the environment, and might be also derived from religious and other beliefs initially. But at the end of the day, we are just part of eukaryotes, so we are just part of life. We are here together with other animals, and where life happens. So you can see a chart that I took from this, looks like an amazing book, Speciesism in Biology and Culture. I would be interested myself to have a look into it, and I like that graph where it shows where bacterial life happens, and then where we are just together with anyone else, more of in a circle, united then as a top, as a pyramid, if you like. So that's the second element from the social aspects in food and beverages, just the awareness of speciesism, and then apparently is not very far from racism and other beliefs like this that make you in which the sense of being superior to others, you know, happen, such as racism and others. So just want to give now a good example, well, a positive example from the Swedish Food Agency that have updated their food plate model to prioritize health of the planet with emphasis on plant-based alternatives to meat and dairy, for example, because you might know that consumption of animal products are, especially meat, are linked to 10 health concerns: heart disease, cancer, stroke, because of the meat. They have a harmful cholesterol that creates blockages on the vessels, and then diabetes, obesity, of course, and some other concerns. So there are all those proved concerns at the moment related to meat consumption specifically, and processed meat and red meat. And we can also see the Swedish Food Agency that now is updating their recommendation for food, for national food consumption, going much more into plant-based alternatives. So that's my slide for the S. Do you think we should stop here for some questions, or should I just carry on?
Questions? Maybe you can carry on and we'll see questions at the end, Maria.
Yes, sure. I'll go to the next slide. So this slide is about environmental, and I do appreciate it is a busy slide, but it's going to be quite simplified for you. I mean, our world in data, this is the best resource if you want to go to the statistics, and those are easily to search. You can go on our world in data and search anything you like about intersections from environmental considerations and the food sector, agriculture, and supply chain in food. So this is something you can do yourselves. It's very easy. But what I wanted to, I extracted two of their charts here, and wanted to outline the environmental impacts of food and agriculture, and the main one. So about 26% of emissions come from food, from the entire emissions inventory worldwide. And then we can see some other big problems are about eutrophication. So this is the lack of oxygen in water, in fresh water and in oceans as well. It mainly comes from the agriculture sector, and 78% of global global eutrophication is caused from agriculture, and the sediments that are brought, for example, on river streams into oceans. And then very interesting to see that the 96% of global mammals, so in biodiversity, in wildlife, comparison between livestock and wildlife, wild mammals is about 3-4%, and domestic of livestock mammals is 96%. That really is a very, I would say, it's very concerning that all mammals globally are mostly the ones that we produce for our own food. And that's very much linked to the land use. So agriculture is using 50% of world habitable land, and the rest are just forest, urban area, and some others. Likewise, poultry livestock is more than 70% compared to just about 30% maybe wild birds. So we can see some food production just gone a bit how to say, disproportionate to the natural environment, not just on a local scale, but when you look at the in the entire big picture, and we wonder how much do we want to go further. And what I would like to say is that the nature always has the capacity to bounce back, to recover itself, but only if we kind of disrupt or minimize that level of pressure, the level of pressure in regards to land use, level of pressure of land exploitation, water streams exploration as well. So the nature has the capability to bounce back and to recover, but only if we eliminated the source of what is causing the initial problem. Yeah, that's it. And just a bit of an insight into global emissions. We can see what are the emissions, where are the sources of emissions from land use, then agriculture production. We can see food processing, so those are like factories, transportation of food, packaging, retail, consumer waste. So those are the you can see the graph with brown, green, and so on. Most of the emissions in food life cycle come from land use and agriculture production, and then much less from transportation. A lot of people, to the comment below, a lot of people say it is important to eat local. Of course it is, but as you can see in the graph from the entire world graph, it's explaining that mainly it's about what you produce, not where it's coming from, because the transportation is quite limited in the global picture of emissions. What is important is what we produce, what we choose to go for as an agriculture production. Do we want to continue having those 96% of global mammal biodiversity being livestock, or do we want to reduce that with alternatives? So that's this is the slide about environmental. Yeah, likewise, I will just go below. I just wanted to emphasize on those generally speaking, the main considerations for environmental impacts in food and agriculture, which are emissions, land use, freshwater withdrawals, the use of freshwater from rivers and groundwater, eutrophication, then of course the concern about mammal biodiversity and bird biodiversity, and then emphasis on the global emissions. So that's what I wanted to speak with you or present today for environmental side. So so the GFI, the Good Food Institute, and the FAIR initiative, they have put together two frameworks. So those frameworks help to conduct due diligence into companies, organizations from an entire supply chain that focus on food production and agriculture. So this can be interesting for investors and for other for the companies themselves or for consumers. So those frameworks created by the Good Food Institute and the FAIR initiative, they give an insight or a method to how to assess ESG considerations, and you can see the three pillars in governance. You can look at sector advocacy. Is that organization, being it alternative protein or animal protein? You can check. They have. You can check about their sector advocacy, about lobbying and donations. So whoever is taking part of doing one of those two frameworks, which is they have to answer those questions. So then they can say we are reporting on GFI and FAIR frameworks for ESG consideration. So that will already give investors and others an insight of having good practices, because they will disclose all those aspects. And then in environmental, water management, soil, circular economy, as we discussed before. And I'm pleased to see that in the S side, in social, they also included workers' conditions, fair and living wage, but then also workers' rewards and opportunities, supply chain. They consider modern slavery, human rights, but also the nutrition and the health of the food, being that from animal products or non-animal products. So there are two frameworks, two ESG frameworks that they have done. One is specialized companies. So in specialized companies, there are just alternative proteins companies evaluated in that framework, while in the diversified company framework, those are companies in food and beverages sector that are in the sector of animal protein or alternative or a mix of both. It's just because some of the aspects in the ESG pillars are maybe less relevant in the specialized companies, being already much more or having other aspects that are more important to them than the general diversified companies. So if you'd like, I actually made some screenshots. You can go on GFI and FAIR alternative websites, and you can download those frameworks, and then you can start maybe practicing screening an organization or a project for due diligence, ESG due diligence, using those pillars and teams and sub-teams in the framework. And the framework explains on how you should use it. If I just to conclude, this is my last slide. When it's say about, I'm not sure if you have heard about WaterBear. WaterBear is like Netflix, but for free, and you have all documentaries in there, and you can choose your topic. It's not just food; it's everything from fashion to discrimination, any topics that are in the ESG sector, basically in sustainability. And why I made this slide at the end is just because exposure is everything. That's how I transitioned myself to being a vegan. You have to be exposed. If you bury things, if we bury things, if we don't give attention, if they're not all the time, if we're not exposed to the reality or to those considerations, then we are not, change is not going to happen. So the best tool for yourself, if you ever consider, is just get as much exposure as possible. And then there are lots of profiles now on Instagram and on LinkedIn that offer that exposure, such as Anonymous for the Voiceless, PETA, of course, many organizations like that. So exposure is everything. You have to be aware and stay aware. And then the resources that I have mentioned in regards to the framework. So the GFI, they have a YouTube channel, and they have amazing newsletter with investor news, but also ESG news as well. And they have LinkedIn. So that's the Good Food Institute profile. And I also brought here the FAIR initiative. They have a protein producer index, which is for any sort of organization, vegan, plant-based or not, and they screen their portfolio or that organization's impact on 10 risks and opportunities. So you can, if you register, or the organizations that register to be part of the FAIR Initiative Protein Producer Index, then they get a rating, and you can get an insight into their rating. So this is very good investor insight, or any projects insight that you want. If you like to know more about an organization, and you can screen it through this index, for example. So that was me. I might remain on this page, but I might go. Yeah. Hello.
Hello. Yes.
That was it. I try my best to speak with you about those ESG considerations in the in the food sector.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Still screen sharing, Maria? Or you wanted to stop your screen?
Should I stop screen sharing?
It's up to you. It's up to
Yes,
you.
let me do that for now. Let me see if I know. I'm not usually on Zoom. I'm more on Teams. Stop share. Yeah, I'm usually working on Microsoft Teams, so getting used to the system.
So thank you very much, Maria. I'm going to see if there are questions in the chat for you. So relating to what you said. Otherwise, I've already one question, which is an important question, I think, and it's something you already know. You have worked on ESG. So do you think ESG are good enough? I mean, relating to what we discussed, veganism, animal welfare, extra. But what do you think of ESG? Maybe more the E, with which refers to animal. Do you think that there is a path for improvement?
In regards to ESG and the alternative proteins, that I can say that definitely alternative proteins and plant-based organizations, they have better ESG ratings than the ones that are not, for sure. Just because the food production in itself is so much more resources intensive. So definitely the ESG considerations of non-animal food is more positive. It's a more positive story than the ones that are from the animal sector. Just when we look at the supply chain, we say that basically when we all the soybean that is produced in Amazon, most of it is produced to feed the animals. It's not for our own food, for example. So it's like, in a way, consuming animal products is like eating second hand. We feed the animals to feed ourselves instead of feeding this food directly. But that's something that I think it's obvious.
I have a question from Vandine.
Yes, hi, Maria. So thank you very much for your presentation. I completely agree with you when you are talking of the myth of human superiority, and you mentioned about the animals for the voiceless to raise awareness. My question is more a bit technical. So it's about the greenhouse gases emissions. You on your slide it was mentioned 25% from food. Do you have a more precise figure regarding animal agriculture? To my knowledge, it's between 14.5% to 25%, depending on the sources, etc. Do you have any?
Yeah, so I do not have like specific metrics like this, and I don't keep a track of them. But what you can do is I'm going to share the link now from our world in data, where you can play yourself with what metrics you are interested in, and see there by all type of foods where each type animal or non-animal, how they perform for water, for emissions. Do let me know how you find it, because this is going to be amazing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do we have other questions? Looking at the chat.
If you like, I found it. I can share screen for a second, maybe.
Oh yes, that would be great.
Let's see if I can do this, so that we can have this conversation now. Do you see this? Our world in data.
Yes.
In data?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So very good platform that a lot of people are using. Environmental impacts of food production, but then you can go into agriculture and others. So this is where I took my resources as well that I used in the past, and we can see emissions per kilogram of food product, and of course, no surprise, the beef is about 100 kilos of emissions, and then lamb, beef, and this is food products. So they are going to, they give more details about what this is considered in the calculation, but yeah, that's the chart basically. Is that helpful for you?
Yes, yes. I was thinking more of how many emissions in terms of carbon dioxide equivalent. But I think
I think
if you can send
here.
the link, I can find this information. If you can send this link in the chat, that would be very helpful.
Of course, and this is equivalent. This is equivalent, as you can see here.
Oh, okay, okay. If this is equivalent.
It is. Yes, it is. And then you have all sorts of charts about others, so you can go ahead with this. Let me see if I. That's the link. Very helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And do you think, Marias, are going to be improved with ESG because, well, you have a lot of people who use them, etc. So I know there are some people working on at European level, so I don't know in other geographical areas, but do you think they are going to change or yes, to improve the contents or
if they are going to change what, Veronique? Sorry about that. In regards to
I mean the definitions, etc. Because as you said, ESG is more based on the classical model, which means that of course they miss some points in the yes. So
yes, I see what you mean. So ESG really has a double materiality. It's basically the organizations or the food sector impact on the environment, but then there is also the environment and the environment constraints or other social constraints impact on the company itself or on that product range. So so that is the ESG's, it has a double materiality, and then just because it's called ESG is encompassing anything that you want in those pillars depending on what is your project. So I have to say that ESG is quite flexible. You can add anything that is relevant into E for you, and then in the S and in the G, depending in which sector you are. That's why there are all these frameworks, because they come with what's their proposal of what should be considered. Otherwise, you can be quite biased into what you include in the ESG. So there is a lot of work at the moment in regards to ESG. Is it does it consider how the organization is impacted or the investment is impacted by ESG consideration, or is it that we assess the company's own or investment portfolio's own impact on environment, social aspects, and governance? So that's what I can say about that.
So it means that basically you have a bias because they analyze the situation from a model, an economic model, which is under change. So of course they should also maybe change the way they approach the situation. But I guess it's not going to be something which is going to appear in a wink. It will take time.
Yes, but I really recommend to use the FAIR initiative. They have very robust ESG analysis in there, and also the Good Food Institute. They engage with the entire world investor sector and innovative company in this space. So the Good Food Institute and the FAIR, really good actors now in the ESG space, specifically in the food sector. And then also, if you would like, please do check Water Bear for everyone here. It's been amazing for me to see so many documentaries for free on this platform. And again, exposure is everything. You can create a free profile. I really recommend Water Bear as well.
Thank you, Maria. It's really interesting. Everything is interesting. How? So just checking if we have another question. Let me see. No. Otherwise, we are going to conclude to end this webinar. It was a very complete webinar. So we thank all the guest speakers. We had 6 wonderful guest speakers from UK, USA, and France, and Dan was in Slovakia, but from the UK. And we also wish to thank all the participants who supported us during this webinar. And of course, we wish you a very nice day, a very nice weekend. And we do hope you are going to push veganism and animal welfare in the future, of course. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. And do not hesitate to send us your questions and if you wish to contact some guest speakers. Okay. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.